Maybe we're already. Oh, I see live. Looks like we're rolling.
All right, cool. So for those that are following after the fact, my name is Miguel, and I'm interviewing Dr. Pat Davidson. Just as an introduction, I met Pat maybe, when did we meet? 2012? Late 2012?
I think so. Where was that?
Was that Mike Boyle's?
Was it the winter seminar maybe? Or no, I think it was just a random day in the summer maybe.
Yeah, I think that's something along the lines. I think it was one of Henry Lau's like seminars or something like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, and we met while I was still interning at Cressy's, and then from there we just happened to cross paths at seminars and all that afterwards. So he's from the Boston area. I'm currently in New Jersey right now, so quite a bit of hours away. But other than that, we're hanging out in Google Hangout, and we're just gonna get rolling with some questions. Essentially, Dr. Pat Davidson is, I mean, he's a little bit of everything. Strongman competitor. He has a PhD in what exactly do you have? I'm sure you have better
It's
grasp of
in
yourself.
it's in exercise physiology. I got that at Springfield College. I completed that in 2009. I studied under Dr. Vincent Pallone, who is a really a tremendous physiologist, and
Right.
yeah, guy taught me a tremendous amount about physiology. Really did.
Right. And essentially, we're going to roll with a couple questions. I threw a bunch of questions out on Facebook on top of having my own questions, so we have uh, quite a bit of things to cover. So let's get rolling with that. The first thing that we're going to cover essentially is your background. That's pretty much what it comes down to.
Right.
Um,
So yeah, I can dive in on that, and
yeah, for sure. Let's
really,
do that.
I suppose that I think that there's some commonalities that I have with some other people in this, where my family situation was not an easy one, and I don't really want to get into the details of all that crap,
Right, right.
but I really sought refuge from everything through athletics. As a young kid, I, I I played sports, and I found that to be really the only thing that I could really rely on in my life, that I could count on, that I could trust. It made me feel good no matter what. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, I just I've always been real driven when it comes to sports. I wanted to be the best that I possibly could be. Baseball was really my primary sport as a kid, and
Okay.
like I could always throw and hit, and I understood the game at a very high level, conceptually and intellectually. But the thing that always limited me was the 40 and the 60s. It was like
Right,
I wanted to play Division One baseball, and I ran about a 5 flat 40, and I tried everything that I possibly could to get
right.
faster, and essentially everything that I did made me slower. Really, it really did. Like, you got to think like this was the mid to late 90s.
Did you do like bodybuilding splits and all that, or?
Oh yeah, man. That's all that was really available in terms of knowledge to resistance training. Uh, and literally, like I learned strength training through ESPN. At that time, it was
Phil
Sports
Jackson.
Center. Yeah, man, it was Sports Center on in the morning, and then after Sports Center got done, there was like the Sean Ray bodybuilding show, and like Frank Zane was on there, Flex Wheeler, and like all those monsters, and they'd be wearing like
Goodness.
fanny packs and spandex and just rocking out on the leg press. And
Yeah.
after that, you'd go to body shaping. There were the aerobic shows too. I remember I used to do all of them, man. I'd sit in my living room and I'd do the aerobic shows with them. Kiana's doing the step with Kendall Hogan. We're doing A
Jeez.
steps and grapevines, and then I'd watch Big Rick and Dr. Pete just slamming it on the Smith machine, and that was all there was, dude. Like that's it.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, man, I used to spend maybe 3-4 hours in the gym, like the local gyms, and I'd be
Right.
doing every like bench press every day, Smith machine squat every day, like
Right.
doing
Yeah, it's sort
triceps,
of typical.
biceps. Yeah, I think I did every tricep exercise you could possibly do. It would be like kickbacks, supersetted with like cable push downs, supersetted with like French press. I
How do you get the lower chest going, right? Or
Oh, dude,
whatever it is.
decline, decline presses, man. Yeah, and then you got to do the calf raises with the toes straight ahead, the toes turned out, the toes turned.
Right, right.
Yeah, same thing with
That's
hamstring
hilarious.
curls and knee extensions. So, I did my absolute best effort to try to get to goals that I wanted, and I used every methodology possible that was exactly wrong. But at the time, that was all I knew, and yeah, I thought for speed development, I had a sand pit out behind my house. I used to run in that thing. I found this humongous hill. I used to do downhill sprints at like this insane 45-degree angle because that would be over speed. I mean, literally now I know, like, good Lord, somebody please do this kid a favor and show him something. Yeah, I mean, I tried my best.
You didn't have any good coaches back in the day, or?
No, man, there were no coaches back then. I didn't even know that strength and conditioning was a thing until 2004.
Right.
All I knew, yeah, like I really didn't, and like I'm very grateful. I ultimately transitioned from baseball, where I went and played baseball as a freshman in college, and I was nowhere near mature enough for that stuff. I kind of drank myself right out of school. I did no schoolwork. I wanted to play baseball, but I was just getting in a lot of trouble at that point.
Right.
I completely bombed out of school my freshman year, and went back home and did a whole lot of drinking and a whole lot of partying, and I was going nowhere, and I found mixed martial arts luckily through that process.
Really?
Yeah, because I was just an angry kid with a lot of issues, and mixed martial arts is a perfect avenue.
Oh yeah.
For an angry 19-year-old that knew nothing other, in terms of what made me feel good about myself, the only thing I knew was training and working hard. And I found a great group of guys that took me in. It wasn't easy, man. The guy that took me in was a guy named John Burke, and he was kind of a local legend on the Cape because everybody kind of knew who he was, and there was always these whispers like, John Burke's this crazy SOB, but he's the toughest son of a bitch you'll ever meet in your life. And I was good friends with his younger brother, and we did all kinds of dumb shit together and got in all kinds of trouble. And John, I remember I told John, hey man, I want to come train with you guys, and he laughed at me. He was like, okay, well, here's how you're going to be able to come train with us. If you can come to my house one day and do 500 Hindu squats in a row and do 300 push-ups, I'll let you come and train. I did it, man. I did it, and
it's like old school, like guru stuff, like.
Yep. And I remember my first day. We went to this place called Willie's Gym, which was just old school kind of bodybuilding sort of gym. There was a back room that maybe was like 8 by 12 with some mats that had holes in them, and it was me, John Burke, a guy named Jesse Sullivan, the kid, and another guy, Jimmy Oliver. That was my first night. Jesse was just a kind of a regular-looking dude, looked pretty athletic, and Jimmy was a real, he's skinny guy, and he probably weighed about $120. And those guys kicked the living shit out of me for about 2.5 straight hours. John kept me in the middle, and they round robined on me. Now Jesse Sullivan is a bad man. Okay. He is a bad dude. He's the sweetest guy you'll ever meet, but he will rock your world if you want to try to get into a hand-to-hand combat situation with him. Jimmy Oliver is about as tough as a $2 steak, too, and it was real humiliating for me to get my ass handed to me by a 120-pound dude. I was real athletic. I was probably about 185 pounds, give or take. But I used the technique of football on these guys. I just tried to charge them and slam them and like WWF body slam them. These guys just kind of flopped around like fishes and let me get myself tired, and then they just laid the smackdown on me. I don't think I could walk for about 2 or 3 days after that, because in between those rounds with those guys beating the bag out of me, John's making me do these crazy drills with the Muay Thai bag, laying on my back and making it go in circles. My legs were so dead. Then it was like, okay, get your ass up and do squats and then push-ups and then sit-ups and every other old school kind of torture device you could think of. But I made it through about 2 hours of this beatdown. And then I'm like in a puddle in a corner, and John comes over to me and goes, okay, we're about halfway through. You ready to get started again? And I just looked at him and I was like, yeah, okay, yeah. And he goes, good fucking answer. You don't have to do anything else. You're good. You're in. And it really was a special moment for me because,
Oh yeah.
you know, it was like I did earn it, and you know, so I jumped in with those guys. I started training with them, and it's fun. Like, why am I telling this? Because this was my intro to strength and conditioning, really. Because maybe a year later, John introduced me to this guy that he grew up with named Jeff Martone, and I don't know if Jeff has ever gotten the respect he really deserves in our field. Jeff is one of the people that was really responsible for bringing kettlebells into the fold. He was friends with Pavel. You know, from what I understand, he was one of the guys that helped bring Pavel to the U.S. And Jeff is a master kettlebell lifter. So it just happens, you know, Jeff and John grew up together in Foxborough, Massachusetts. They did kung fu together. They were badasses together. And Jeff came back and was hanging out with John. And basically, you know, he took us through a day of showing us how to lift kettlebells and how to do his tactical athlete pull-up system stuff and how to do tensioning techniques and all that kind of stuff. And what a great experience that was. And then
was it 2004? 2005, you
this
said?
was probably in 2000.
2000, okay.
Yeah, but I didn't know what strength and conditioning was. I was just a fighter who knew that Jeff was the man.
Lifts
And
and all that.
yeah, and like he showed us the Yanda sit-up, and it was like the most embarrassing thing I've ever done. I couldn't even do one. Yeah, and you know, then a couple of years later, I was training with another guy named Hale, and Hale was just this monster. We used to call it the Hale bull charge. Like, he'd hit you square in the chest with his forehead, and you'd get lifted like a forklift hit you, and he'd just drive you into a corner and beat the bag out of you. And I was like, Hale, you're the strongest dude I've ever met. Like, what kind of stuff do you do? And he's like, well, I got these West Side barbell squat workout videos. I crushed good mornings, and I crushed box squats. And I was like, okay, can I have those videos? So, you know, I think this was around 2003, 2004. So I'm sitting there, and you got to understand, like, I did study strength and conditioning. I didn't know it was a field. But as a kid, you know, trying to pursue speed development, I actually did read Burko Shansky stuff back when I was a teenager in the 90s, you know, and I didn't know that. I have no idea. Like, I have no idea. But I found some.
There's no internet back in the day, right?
No internet, man. I think it was like literally one of the other guys that I was training with had found it, and he just handed me some like articles and stuff. But I guess I was doing plyos as a teenager. You know, I guess. I mean, they were very bad. They were dumb. Like, I didn't know anything about really doing them.
Jumps.
I think I was wearing work boots and, you know, using bleachers and stuff like that. It was god awful, but
getting after it.
But anyways, you know, Hale gives me these West Side squat workout videos, and I see these dinosaurs just crushing deadlifts and good mornings. Like, you know, I remember seeing Chuck Vogelpohl going into a seizure, pulling like 700 pounds in training, and then it was like the next dinosaur up, and then the next dinosaur, and then you got Louis just spitting out numbers and body weights and percentages. I've never heard of a percentage in my entire life before that, but I'm sitting in my bedroom, and I got my little notebook, and I'm writing all this stuff down, and I'm hitting rewind every.
This is VHS, mind you, for anyone who's watching and not understanding.
Yep, VHS, baby. Like, so, yeah, I got all these percentages and all this stuff, and I think that day I went and lifted in John's garage, and I think I did it completely wrong. I had it all backwards. I think I did 12 sets of 2 at max effort type intensity with straight up good mornings, and I remember, yep, and then I crushed my spinal erectors on a level that no human ever should. Then later on that night, we went in to train, and we're doing some like jump rope drills and like duck unders under a rope that we used to do all the time. And literally my spinal erectors failed. They just failed, and I collapsed on the ground and went into like back spasms and almost like a seizure type of situation. But hey, I
wonder why.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, day one, like 10 or 12 by 2 with like literally 90% on a barbell with good morning. And like
200 pounds, 135.
Well, I probably like probably somewhere in the range of like 250, 275.
Shit.
Like, yeah, I mean, I don't think, again, that was one of those ones where I don't think I walked well for about 2 weeks. But I just kept crushing it, just kept getting after it, and that stuff got me real strong, dude. You know, I finished my undergrad in history at that point in time. I thought I was gonna be, yep. I mean, I love history. I like modern European history and Chinese philosophy.
History.
The whole deal. And hey, I'm a member of the National History Honor Society still. So it's like
coming from a guy who bombed out freshman year.
Yep, I bombed out, man. Bombed out, like, but I did get my head on straight through MMA, and John Burke basically taught me a lot of life lessons. He told me, you know, he's real gruff, dude. The only way I can explain this guy, think of like John Wayne mixed with, like, I don't know, the 1970s Oakland Raiders or something like that.
All
like,
of them.
Yeah, all of them.
All of them.
I mean, dude, this guy he's got a broken neck. He's got a completely experimentally fused thoracic spine. Like, he can't even walk. Like, this guy's legs go numb on a daily basis. You know, and literally, like, you had no chance against this guy. No chance. You know, he couldn't train because he wouldn't be able to walk for days after that doing anything. But sometimes he just got pissed off and jumped in and literally beat the bag out of anybody. And we had Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts from Brazil who dominated at the world level in our training group. I grew up on Cape Cod, and that's a place where a lot of guys from Brazil came to work in you know, hotels and everything else. Right. And they just happened to be dudes that were nasty international level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys. And the only place to train was John Burke's basement. That was the only place. And those guys, we used to have really, really high-level training sessions in that basement. You know, we had the Wall of Pain.
That sounds like Fight Club, actually.
It was Fight Club. It was Fight Club. The Wall of Pain was the thing that it was an honor to put your name on the Wall of Pain. And the only way you could sign your name on the Wall of Pain was if you went through a round robin of 10 people in a row. You had to stay out there, and it was the rules that we had were open hand to the face and the head, and closed fist to the body, and
no gloves.
Yep, full on like MMA style, and you know, the only, like, it was 3 minutes per guy, 3 minutes, and that's right. That is 30 straight minutes of fighting at a high level against legit. Yep. And these guys were mean too, man. They were not nice, and like, because you knew, like, if you went through that 10-man round robin, you got to sign the wall, and that
was it. People
took that wall really, really seriously, and I remember the night that I got to sign the wall. This guy that I kind of grew up with, Schooner Grady, man, like. I met him when I was about 10 years old because my family sold his family an Akita puppy because we raised dogs growing up. And Schooner was this monstrous basketball player, bodybuilder, stud athlete. And I remember he was the last guy I had to go against. And I was so tired. I was literally trying to crawl away from Schooner on the mat. And Schooner grabbed me by the back of the hair, flipped me over, and punched me in the stomach so hard that I threw up instantly all over the mat. John got so pissed at me, man. Like, he was so pissed. He was like, "You don't throw up on the mat. That's bullshit. You know, you get the bucket, you come back down here immediately, you scrub that pile up." I did. You know, it's like, that was just the lessons learned in that basement, man. And I got to sign my name on that wall, and that's one of the proudest accomplishments of my entire life, signing that wall. Because that wall is still there, and you know, John created a better business down the road, and he had a legit gym, a legit ring, the whole deal. But only maybe 10 or 12 guys have ever signed that wall, and every guy on that wall is a monster. And yeah, so that was kind of my intro, and you know,
yeah,
as an athlete, and really, like, so I finished my undergrad.
Let's transition to
yeah.
talking about your like formal,
Yep.
less
Nope.
more formal background. There you go. How's that background for you?
Yeah,
So
there it is.
they know
All right.
you now.
All right. There, you told
How
me
about
about.
your formal background now, right?
Yep, absolutely. So, I was this history major, and I wanted to maybe teach history in a high school or something like that. But there were no jobs, man, no jobs available.
Right.
So I ended up working in a fish delivery company. One of the other guys that I trained with fighting owned his own business, Cape Cod Clam, and he was looking for somebody to drive the trucks and to gut fish and to put the bands around the lobster claws and all that kind of jazz.
Right.
So I did that, and oh, it was horrible, man. Like, work day started at 5 a.m. I had to drive a fish truck to Boston. So I had to wake up every day at 4:15, and he was not very forthcoming about how many hours I would have to work for him, because every day it was 5 a.m. until about 6 p.m. And as soon as the work day was over, I'd go and fight. And Kurt
Yep.
was another guy that fought. So it was cool because I got to punch my boss in the face, and he got to punch me in the face too. And this guy had heavy hands. It was cool. Like, I like that. Like, that's better to me than like a formal. But anyway, so it was
Yeah.
it was a horrendous job, man. I got one Sunday off every 2 weeks, and basically wanted to kill myself in that job scenario. And I was thinking about doing a master's program in history, and John was like, Pat, what the hell are you thinking, man? I don't know anybody who likes training more than you do.
Right.
You study this stuff relentlessly. Why aren't you pursuing this as a career? And it was like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why? Yeah, good question.
The light bulb goes off, and
Right.
so I did my undergrad in history at Bridgewater State College, and I used to work out in the gym there, and there was this woman there who did weird stuff. She had funky shoes, and she used to do Olympic lifts, and I knew what power cleans were, but I mean, we're talking elbows down, catching with like ninja grip, and
Fish star, whatever it's called, starfish. Catching
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Oh, it wasn't even that good. Wasn't even that. We're just talking like just ninja death grip, holding the bar 5 inches out in front of your shoulders with probably a $185. Just ugly. Holding it there and front squatting like that. I mean, the worst. So I remember going up to her one day in undergrad, and I was like, "What do you do? Like, what are you like?" Because when you see something and you know it's legit. I mean, she was just legit.
Yeah. Like,
So
they take their time, they're serious, they understand it, and then like, but you don't know what they're doing.
no clue, no clue. She's doing plyos and Olympic lifts. Anyways, I remembered her, and so I applied for some kind of a graduate program and something that I thought was what I wanted to do. It was athletic training. Yep. And
Yeah.
so I got in because there was a loophole. Essentially, the application said that if your GPA was above 375 and you scored over 1100 on your GREs, you were automatically in.
Right.
Automatically. And so I had that stuff. And
As a history major.
so I applied for athletic training. I thought athletic training was, I don't know, whatever I thought strength and conditioning was. So I get there, and like first semester is like, who the hell even knows? It was like upper extremity anatomy and
Right.
taping class.
400 hours of volunteer, whatever.
Yeah. And then I quickly found out I was going to be taping ankles and spraying Gatorade bottles into dudes' mouths like Mama Bird. And I was like, wait.
That's funny. I did 2 years at Temple, and that was the same thing. So
Yeah, like I didn't know. It sounded like it was athletic training, right? So I figured I'd be training athletes.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know. That's how dumb I was. I had no clue. And you got like this was 10 years ago now. It's funny to think about.
Yeah, exactly.
So I get into it. I quickly realize, this isn't what I thought it was. And wait, I'm only going to make like 30 grand? Like, what the hell is this? So I remember I saw that same woman again that was doing those Olympic lifts with those Olympic shoes and doing plyos, and she was training this other kid, Craig Buckley, who was an All-American wrestler, and Craig was, just a nasty dude, man. Like, he was a sick lifter. I remember watching this kid cleaning barbells that were like over 300 pounds, and he was the 184. He was a 184 All-American at the Division III level and just a beast. And I was like, I need to know who these people are. And so I just walked up to her in the gym and I was like, I need to do whatever it is that you're doing. And she was like, well, I'm starting a master's program in strength and conditioning this year. You're in athletic training, right? And I was like, yeah. I don't like it, though. So she was like, you can be in the program with me if you want. And I was like, yes, let's do this ASAP. So it turns out she's Dr. Ellen Robinson, and she now holds world records in women's masters weightlifting. She's competed in Russia and all over the world. And she's the New England USAW person, and
right.
I mean, she's a beast. Science, practice, application, a consummate lifelong learner, the whole deal. And so
you seem to surround yourself with several beasts throughout your life.
That's it, man. I just identify people that are monsters, and I just jump in with them and don't ask too many questions, and just try to learn everything it is that I think they know. So Ellen Robinson taught me strength and conditioning, and it was great. I think there were 5 of us in that program. It was me, Buck, Kevin O'Neill, who I got to see this past weekend at BSMPG.
Yeah,
I loved him because
I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute, but
absolutely. Yeah. He's just a 6'5" Irish dude that weighs about 300 pounds with one of the most epic goatees and shaved heads I've ever seen. So obviously we became friends instantly. Another guy,
so similar.
Rob Ricciardi, who maybe the best strength coach that's a landscaper in the history of the world. He had a weird little path that led him back to landscaping ultimately. Another guy named Mike Ward and another dude named Jay Price. That was a group. And the cool thing about that program was that, we had classes and all that stuff, but we lifted together as a group.
Right.
We trained and we competed in weightlifting together as a group.
Right.
And, I remember at that time, like, I didn't have a whole lot going on for me in life. I lived in a crappy little bedroom in a weird dude's house next to the campus because I could afford it. And I didn't have a computer back then. I didn't even know how to send emails back then. You think I'm technologically backwards now. I didn't have a cell phone until 2008, and I didn't send an email until 2006. I just didn't like that stuff. I was a history guy. I liked books and dust. So
nice. There you go.
But what I liked was I used to go to the library every night right after dinner at 7 o'clock, and it was me and the kids from Japan. That was it. Like the foreign exchange students from Japan and me, the only people in the library until midterms and finals came around. And I was like, who the hell are these people? These people in my library. But I would just sit at the computer and literally read the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research, and then I would read every single West Side Barbell article written by Louis Simmons, and then I found out about Elite FTS, and I read every single thing. And then Dr. Robinson got me this weird little GA position in the grants office, and I hated it, but I completely ignored all my responsibilities and sat there all day, and I would read a combination of TuckerMax.com and Elite FTS, and then I read all the Sportivny Press weightlifting articles, and, all of that stuff. I would read it from basically 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. and not do a damn thing for that office. They were real pissed that they hired me, man. because I didn't even try to hide it, you know.
You don't seem to be the person to hide that kind of stuff.
No, I can't. Like I've given up on that. But you know, so Dr. Robinson, she was just the most amazing person I've ever met, and I basically said I want to be just like her, and I was like, where'd you do your PhD? And she was
Right.
like, Springfield College. So I was like, well, I'm going to do a PhD at Springfield College then.
I'm gonna do it there. Yeah, exactly.
You know, so I go and I interview with Dr. Pallone, and he was like, okay, well, do you want a tour of the campus? And no, I don't want a tour of the campus. He's like, well, what are you interested in research? And I was like, well, I have no idea. I don't even want to do research. And he was like, well, where else are you applying? And I said, nowhere. Nowhere. This is the only place I'm applying. And I was like, I know that you have to take me because I got a 4.0 average and my GRE scores are above the line that you said are the required things. So I know that I'm coming here. Like, I know this. And he's like, well, he's like, this is the weirdest interview I've ever had with a student. Like, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to be just like Dr. Robinson. He was like, what? Like, what? That doesn't even make sense. And you know, he's like, well, all right, you will come here. I can't deny that. You're correct in terms of your credentials and your ability to make the list. So he's like, well, first semester is going to be cardiovascular physiology and, you know, anatomy and all these other classes. And I was like, yeah, I really don't want to study cardiovascular physiology, but I'll do it anyways. He was like, why don't you want to learn that? And I was like, because it involves nothing having to do with the phosphagen system and crushing weights. You know, and so he's like, okay, I guess, and so, you know, at the end of this interview, he goes, I don't understand you particularly well, but what you're gonna have to do, just keep in mind, the first day you show up here, you need to pack a lunch and tie your boots on tight because you're going to work. And I was like, don't worry about it. I know how to work, man. Don't worry. I got you.
You don't know me.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I started that program, and dude, that was an intensive program. I mean, right away we had lab reports that were like 40 pages long, and they were due the next week. And we had about 7 or 8 of them for that cardiovascular physiology class. And
right.
It was a midterm, a final, a presentation, and like 8 lab reports. And I didn't sleep much. And I just absolutely crushed. I crushed that program though. You know, I've always been competitive, and the only thing that was motivating me was that I wanted to embarrass every other student in the program. Yeah, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to show everybody, you guys don't even have a goddamn chance because I'm going to go in on this stuff so hard that your grades. Like if you get a B, it's only because he felt bad for you because my stuff was so much better than yours that it was just a pity B. And
that's like Muhammad Ali stuff. Like, did you have any like rhymes and sayings and quotes that you said to these people? You know what I'm talking about? Before like,
I didn't need to. I didn't need to. Everybody knew. Everybody kind of knew because I didn't really want too many friends. I didn't really want anything other than just to get to where I was going. But as the process went along, I made some really good friends in that program and like met some people that were unbelievably smart and just as motivated as me. And that was great because we pushed each other back and forth. And, you know, I remember, you know, writing lab reports at like 3 in the morning and just thinking to myself, I know Mary's doing the same thing right now because she lives right next door to me. And I see her light still on, and I know that she's pushing herself real hard, and I do not want her beating me in this lab report. I will continue grinding, and
that's awesome. That's fucking awesome.
So you know, I learned physiology almost accidentally because I didn't give a crap about it. I just wanted to embarrass people academically, and I don't know, man. Like I have
like backwards. Yeah.
I have no ability to explain why I've been successful in a lot of ways. Like I am a completely different kind of animal than most people, and like what motivates me is bizarre. But I don't really question it too much anymore because I'm pretty happy with what I know. Well, I'm not happy with what I know because I know.
Yeah.
I know people.
I
like, Yeah, I know people like your boss exist, and I know people like
Yeah.
Phil Hartman exist, and I know Eric Otter exists,
Yeah, exactly. Right.
and it's like, damn,
That's national level then, right? That's a different level.
it's a
So
different level. But
yeah.
yeah, that's kind of my story, and I'll tell you what though,
Yes.
from a formal like Springfield College was a great place for me to go because it is the meathead capital of the world, and you know, day one, even before I started classes,
Right.
I made sure I introduced myself to Dr. Jones and Dr. Thompson, and I walked right down into the athletes' weight room because I wasn't an athlete on campus, but I walked
Hmm.
down there and I saw all the GAs in the weight room crushing Olympic lifts. I saw Allison Bradshaw screaming this like Xena warrior princess primal scream as she was cleaning and jerking 235 as a female. You know what I'm saying? Like I was like, oh my God, I'm in the right place. I walked up to Allison and I was like, we're training together. You don't know me, but we're training together. And oh yeah, I mean,
That's
like
great.
all I did there was I spent time in the weight room getting stronger and listening and watching these GAs who were ahead of me at the time in terms of
Right.
their understanding of strength and conditioning. Uh, I've just been very lucky, man. I bumped into the right people, and I just kept my eyes open and learned from all these people, and so that was cool. And once I finished, my first job was at Brooklyn College, and I went down there and I basically implemented the Mike Boyle Functional Strength Coach Volume 3.0 in that
Right.
sense. And it was a bunch of kids that were city kids that had no kind of formal strength and conditioning, but we built a weight room together. We called it the Pit, and we trained hard, man. And those kids still train hard down there in the Pit. They've kept that thing running.
Good.
Um, and then I came to Springfield College, and I wanted to create a new pit, basically. That's really all I really wanted to do. I wanted a new pit, and I wanted, because I knew Springfield College is the home of monsters. And I was like,
Right.
oh, I'm like salivating to just train with these undergrad kids. And because I learned through training with Dr. Robinson. And
Yep.
I thought it was the same model that I could display there. The school didn't really want that, though, to tell you the truth. They did not like that at one bit. But I didn't really pay attention to the writing on the wall. I just kept driving what I thought was right. Landed me out on the street, ultimately. But I got no regrets. I have no regrets with what I did there.
Right.
Uh, but I don't know, man. I was real excited to go there because I knew Sam Leahy was a student there. And
Yes.
I listened to Sam Leahy, and I'll tell you what, Sam Leahy has pointed me in the right directions every step of the way. He was like, Sam. A lot of people know Sam. He's one of the most excitable dudes ever.
Hmm.
And I remember he was telling me about DNS, and I was like, what in the hell is DNS? And so I just forced my way into a DNS-A course at Northeastern. And that's where I met Kevin Neild, and I met Connor Ryan, I met Art
Right.
Moore, I met a lot of people that have been very influential on me.
Yeah.
Whether they
Same.
know it or not, they've been very influential. And I remember, I was such a mess. Like, it was like embarrassing how I could not do any of those exercises.
I remember hearing some stories.
I think I had the most explosive reflex locomotion episode that's ever taken place. Like just yeah, type 2 fiber reflex locomotion crawling pattern.
I
But I
think
remember,
that's
some of these
abnormal.
guys, yeah, these guys felt bad for me, I think, to tell you the truth. They were like, man, your T-spine sucks on a level that I've never seen a human T-spine suck at. And at that point in time, I think I went out to dinner, and it was it was like the strength coaches at one table and the PTs at another table. All the
And
strength coaches are drinking beer and eating burgers, and we look over, and all the PTs have red wine and fish. And
the heck?
it was hilarious. But
Never seen that now, right?
no, no, no. But Kevin, I like to think I'm a smart dude and that I can kind of drop some knowledge on people and talk a good game.
Right.
And I'm talking. I'm trying to. And Kevin opened his mouth, and I shut the hell up because I was like, this guy is on a whole other level from me. And he was talking about sphenoid and sternum and sacrum. I'm like,
What?
yeah. And three-dimensional breathing and rib fill, the whole deal. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know what this guy's talking about, but I need to up my game dramatically. And it
Yeah.
took me a couple of, what was it, another year or so, maybe 2 years. I'm trying to think the timetable, but I ultimately did jump into PRI because other people were,
I remember at the time when I met you in 2012, you were still unfamiliar with the foundation of what PRI was.
totally
I think
unfamiliar.
you were still not spouting, but we were still on the DNS tip, if that makes sense.
Totally. I mean, I was, reading everything I could from, Gray Cook, reading.
Oh yeah, that's all good. Yeah.
I read the Yonda approach, that phenomenal book. Oh yeah, it's all good, man.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
like
Let
so
me pop one of these other slides on. We've already been talking about it, but I just have all these awesome slides. So this was even from PRI, a PRI course.
there it is, man.
It's one of the questions. What drives you, specifically as a student within the industry, like the strength and conditioning industry, not really the fitness industry, but strength and conditioning, really. So.
I'll be perfectly honest. I'm one of the most self-centered and selfish people you will ever meet in your entire life, and one of the pretty much the only thing that really matters to me. I still want to win a national championship in strongman. I want to win the goddamn world championship. Like I've got no chance, by the way, no chance in the world championship stuff.
What are your stats for the people who are unfamiliar with your physical stature?
Well, it's always tough to give stats for strongman because it's such a weird sport in terms of like numbers. Because if the next person that asks me how much the car deadlift weighs, I swear to God, I'm gonna punch you right in the throat. Nobody knows. It's a car.
It's a fucking car.
Yeah, it's a car. I don't know. It feels really freaking heavy. It feels like a 600 and something pound trap bar that's at a weird angle that you have to hack squat like a old school hack squat.
Yeah.
Imagine hack squatting the heaviest goddamn trap bar you've ever felt in your life. That's how much the car weighs. So it's always tough. Like my best deadlift is 585.
Straight bar, conventional.
Yep, straight bar pull. I did that at a body weight of 175. I did the first time I pulled 185 was at the Arnold Classic 175-pound World Championship 2 years ago. I was wearing a suit at that time, and I think I ripped the thing off the ground, almost fell over backwards because I was struggling with learning the deadlift suit, and I was really worried about the 585-pound straight bar pull and the deadlift. It was part of a medley. It was like the second implement that you had to pull. It was like a 450-pound axle. Then you go to the straight bar. Then it was a 735-pound frame, and then it was a car for reps.
Right.
So, but everybody was worried about the straight bar, and the straight bar did bury over half the field because that's a heavy-ass pull. I don't care who you are. A 175-pound athlete pulling 585 is a heavy-ass pull. But, dude, when I picked that thing up, it felt like air, and I was like, okay, well, shit, I guess I can do that.
Yeah, exactly.
And since then, I managed to pull that in training with just a belt, and so I don't know where my dead's at right now. The deadlift is still the exercise I look at is like if I want to gauge my strength, deadlift, like primitive, pick it up. What can you do with it? So in terms of numbers, let me think. Like
I'm saying like height, weight.
Oh, okay. I'm 5'6". Right now, I'm 173 pounds. My weight has fluctuated over the years. When I competed in MMA, I fought at 154.5 pounds when I was in my early 20s. The day that I stopped doing MMA in 2006, when I had no time because of the PhD program, my body I gained 60 pounds in 3 months. Yeah, I ballooned way up to about the heaviest I've been was 220, and and ultimately, like when I lived in Brooklyn, I was sitting right around 210 for the most part. Like,
right.
And then all of a sudden, like, somebody actually got me a going away present when I was leaving Brooklyn, and it was this BioSignature eval with a guy named Kevin Adair.
There you
And
go.
Kevin, yeah, Kevin met with me, and he was like, okay, well, I want you to listen to this concept that gluten is probably your worst enemy, and it's probably something. He's like, you are a stocky Irish dude. Uh, do they grow wheat in Ireland? I was like, no, potatoes, obviously. He's like, your genetic history is probably one that's as far removed from wheat-based eating as anyone's could ever be. Even if you don't have celiac disease, you're probably about as intolerant to gluten as you could ever be. Literally, I didn't know what gluten was, and this was
Right.
2010. Yeah, 2010. So I had to Google gluten, and then I was like, oh my god, it's in all the fucking things that I eat. Every goddamn thing in life has gluten in it. Shit. But literally, I just took gluten out of my diet, and I lost. I didn't even cut calories, but I went from like 210 pounds to about $190 in like 2 months. And at
Nice.
that point in time, like, I had gotten to Springfield College, and like the undergrad kids that competed in strongman that I was teaching had
Mhm.
talked me into going over and trying strongman. And as soon as I did it, they were like, well, you need to compete now, obviously. And I was like, all right, fine. And I'm looking at the weight.
You got me.
The weight classes were like, I'm looking at, it's like 175, 200, and the 200-pound weights were ridiculously heavy. And I was like, I don't know if I can pick that shit up, man. Like, it's pretty obvious I'd have to go 175, so I started actually paying attention to nutrition at that point.
Right, right.
So I listened to Rob Wolf podcasts and got ripped, and it was pretty easy. And people were always asking me questions about nutrition. I'm like, just listen to that podcast. Start from the first episode and just keep going.
Right.
It's real simple. It worked for me. I'm pretty sure it'll work for you. Every single person that's listened to me has gotten shredded and stronger. But my weight has fluctuated all over the place. And I feel like right now I'm actually in a place where it's kind of stabilizing to a certain degree, somewhere in the range between 170 and 180. And I feel pretty good. So,
yeah, I want to go off that tangent about being, working at Springfield, working with your guys in undergrad and all that. Working with those guys, like, on that same note, at the end of the day, like, you're still an educator, like, even if you don't want to be, like, that's your role, like, even a coach, like, what drives you as being a teacher, educator, coach, all those in one. So
I'll tell you what, man, the reason that we are successful, or that we were successful as a team, Team Iron Sports at Springfield College, almost every single one of those kids is somebody that I've coached and I've taught in multiple classes. I had a developmental program in my mind that I engineered through the classroom. I was teaching classes because I wanted to teach my lifters science so that they could be better lifters.
Right.
And, it started with measurement and evaluation. That was, essentially an undergraduate stats class. And, of course, I geared that thing towards learning lifting-based science and number programming. You know what I mean? Of course I did. The next class in the lineup was exercise testing and prescription for special populations. I really didn't want to teach that class going into it, but I quickly learned that I really enjoyed it, and I was able to teach a lot of really abstract physiology and pathophysiology, which, and the other cool thing about it, that class historically involved students having to train a staff member or a faculty person on the campus. So I was like, well, if they have to train somebody, I have to make damn sure they know how to train people.
Right,
so,
right.
I put together some just lectures that I wrote off the top of my head on training, and we spent the beginning of that class talking about real deal training, and it worked really well because a lot of the kids in those classes were kids that were not strength and conditioning kids. They were the cardiac rehab kids. They were this, they were that. And every single one of those kids was very appreciative of that stuff because, well, quite frankly, it wasn't the ACSM goddamn guidelines. and it wasn't the
That's great.
NSCA, Strength Coach of the Year 1992 bullshit,
Yeah.
And most of those kids were like, you totally changed my perspective on everything that I thought I knew about exercise. And I was like,
Not 3 by 10.
Yeah, thank God, because if you were gonna go out and like just follow ACSM, here's the thing that I used to say that got the point across to these kids.
Nice. Okay.
ACSM guidelines are to exercise as Will Smith is to rap. Okay, so Will Smith.
Nice.
Will Smith, you can play Will Smith in front of your grandmother. You can play Will Smith in front of your boss if you work at a shitty office. You can play Will Smith at a summer picnic in front of everybody. Nobody's going to be offended. It's very safe. But Will Smith sucks, dude. Everybody, like, he sucks. He sucks as a rapper. I hate that shit. Okay, like, come on, let's get into some Jay-Z. Let's get into some Biggie. Let's get into some Tupac, some Eminem. Let's get some real deal rap. You know what I mean?
Right.
But you can't play that stuff in front of everybody. You got to be pretty selective in terms of who you play that stuff to, because not everybody's ready for it.
Yeah.
And I basically was saying, like, the ACSM guidelines make sense because you can be some jerk off weekend certification personal trainer, and then you can run somebody through a treadmill protocol and machines, and you're not going to hurt them, but are you really going to do anything that's good? Maybe on like the most basic level. I mean, I was thinking that like Mike Boyle has one of the greatest quotes of all time. Treadmill walking is to exercise as eating sugar packets at Dunkin' Donuts is to nutrition. It is the absolute bare bones minimum that will like keep you alive, but is it doing anything more than that? No. It's horseshit. And everybody knows it, but what we teach in school is that this is the model. And I just didn't want any part of that stuff. No part of that. But so I had those classes. I had measure and eval, special pops, and then strength and conditioning. And I'll tell you what, that strength and conditioning class was a monster.
Was it packed all the time or what?
It was, yeah. I think the department didn't even like how many people were trying to get into that because it caused headaches for the advising process.
Can you green card me into that class? Or whatever it is.
Exactly. And I never said no to anybody that wanted to be enrolled in that class. So there weren't enough chairs usually, even for the 8 a.m. one. And my favorite class to teach, though, strength and conditioning, was tied to strength and conditioning applications. And it was once a week for like 2.5 hours, and it was like, all right, guys, we're going in on this stuff. I'm going to teach you every single thing that I possibly know, and we're going to do it. We're going hands-on. We're gonna get after it. And that was a lot of fun. And then my last year, like the school made some weird decision about like faculty members are no longer going to be teaching 1-credit hands-on classes, and it's going to be handed off to like grad assistants. And I remember saying to my department chair, can you just put on paper that the grad students are teaching it, and I'll teach the damn thing for free? Like, can you please do that? And she was like, well, this is, it's a 1-credit class, Pat. It's not that important. And I almost freaked out. Like, I really did. I was like, you have no idea how important that class is. It is the most important class that these kids have to take because these kids want to be the best strength coaches in the world. And
exactly.
Like, I'm up there. Whether or not you like it, whether or not you believe it, because they just thought I was some dumb jerk. I really, and it makes sense. Like, I don't look like I'd be a smart person. I mean, I remember, Dr. Pallone, my last year there, he basically said, Pat, like, no one would ever think that you're a smart and fairly kind of professional guy based on the way you look. No one would ever think that about you. Huh. And I was like, wow, thank you. Thanks. Is that a compliment? Like, what is that?
Yeah, like blanket statement.
But I mean, like, and I was talking with my sister the other day, and she's kind of like one of those pretty blonde girls, And she's a real smart girl too, and she's like, no one ever thinks I'm smart. They think I'm a superficial blonde idiot, and I've used that to my advantage my whole life. And I kind of feel the same way. Like, nobody expects me to have any kind of intelligence in my head. And I'm okay with that now. That's fine. That's fine with me.
And then you blow their mind with some simple breathing exercises, and then
yeah. Because you know how hard PRI can rock somebody's world, unlike any other thing that's out there.
Yeah, it's pretty big game changer. Hey,
but
let's move.
That's enough of my story. Yeah,
So we've gone over like your history and what really gets you going. Even from an athletic point of view, I just want to show this guy off.
There's my boy Kearney in the background too. See that guy in the left corner?
Yeah. Checking it out.
He's one of the youngest pro strongmen in the business, and we have very different outlooks on life. But I love that kid because he is a monster, and he won 131-pound national championships in Texas this year, and he won it so big he didn't even have to do the last event. He was numerically already the national champion before he even did that. I mean, you're talking about a kid that's I think he's hit a 400-pound log clean and jerk, and he's deadlifted in the mid-sevens, and he is, I believe, 22 years old.
How much does he weigh?
He walks around somewhere around 245, and he competes at 231. Smart kid, too. Smart kid, one of the most motivated people I know, and I'm real proud of that kid.
Right. All right, hey, let's move on to this next question.
Yeah.
Paul had a question similar to this, but I'm going to clump this together. Obviously, I know you can read. What are 1 or 2 lessons you know now that you wish you knew earlier in your 20s, early on in your career?
It's a great question, and it's something, I've always struggled with kind of figuring out who the hell I am as a person. Interestingly enough, the information that I acquired at the TMCC course in February has really helped me kind of learn who I am. But
yeah, definitely.
What the message that I wanted to get across, and I'll tell you what, Kyle O'Flaherty is somebody who's been very special to me, and he asked a a Facebook question too, and I'm going to kind of merge those two because he asked me about sleeper cell students.
Right, I was going to ask that, yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of the same thing, and I think Mark Fisher represents the answer that I'm going to give you very well too.
Yep.
Because I think that people believe that success is kind of a one-dimensional pathway.
Yep.
And it is not a one-dimensional pathway. You can be like, I'm an odd person, and I've come to realize that over time, and I've come to be okay with that.
Well, what is normal?
Well, exactly. What is normal? But I think that, some people want a white picket fence and they want to have a quiet family life and they want to get, the wife and the kids and the dog and the mid-sized sedan and the garage. And dude, that kind of makes me want to throw up in my mouth a little bit. It does. It makes me kind of crawl in my skin. And I didn't grow up with a nuclear family of any kind, like that. And for me, I don't really know what necessarily makes me happy yet as a person, but I'm just beginning to say to myself, I'm kind of okay with being whatever the hell I am. I don't even know what I am as a person or what I stand for in some ways, and I'm okay with that even. But there are many, many avenues to ultimately finding happiness and success. As long as I think the one secret is you have to find the thing in life that you like and that kind of you want to do. And for me, it's lifting weights. It always has been. I think it probably always will be. And I want to learn everything that I possibly can that will help me lift weights at the highest possible level. And that somehow has caused me to bump into all the right people, and I try to explain this, like I love the book The Alchemist. And,
Oh, I love that book. Yeah.
it's kind of like,
You're that dude asking all those questions. You're not the main character. You're the secondary guy, right? Is that what it is?
I think I think I'm on a pursuit and a path, and I've had such a troubled life history with, well, quite honestly, substance abuse and personal abuse and psychological issues and the whole deal, and somehow, some way, I've kind of managed to get out of that. And I've come from a family with a long history of that kind of stuff,
Okay.
and you know, I remember John Burke was kind of saying you need to break a cycle and you need
Yes.
to get out of a pattern that's existed for a long time. And I'll tell you what, I still think of that kind of stuff, and I still think like if I can stay on a path that appears to be a good path for me, I will continue to bump into road signs along the way that if I keep my eyes open to them will represent moments where the universe is conspiring to help me stay on the right path, and I can be whatever kind of person I am, and as long as I'm kind of true to myself, then other people who respect that, they don't even have to agree with it, will see that, and they'll be on board with that, and
Right.
and the more I've kind of allowed myself to fall into that, the better my life has become, and the better the people that I've surrounded myself have become. And
Right. I think there's this one quote from The Alchemist. I like that book. I love the book as well. Uh, I write down like quotes obviously from things I read, and one thing was, and when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it.
yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes in the world. It really is. Like, it's a beautiful thought, and I believe in it 100%.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's move on to the Paul had a question. Um, the biggest epiphany of the last 2013, 2014 years for you. And then his secondary question, what paths has he gone down excitedly and later realized ultimately are dead ends?
Okay, I'm going to answer the second part.
Okay.
For me, a lot of the DNS stuff has been kind of a dead end.
Really?
Yeah, in some ways, I like the exercises. Don't get me wrong. I think that look, I am not an expert in DNS. I took DNS-A, and I've kind of worked with a physical therapist who's pretty high level in DNS,
Right.
and the SFMA stuff. And I think that ultimately a lot of those exercises are great, actually, from a fitness development standpoint. Okay, but
Explain
not
that.
if you're not neutral first. You know. And
Right.
look, I'm the kind of guy, listen, I don't know enough to make these kind of claims at a big-time level, and I'm probably exposing myself as being ignorant, but, well, quite frankly, fuck it. Because I know what I know, and if I
Yes.
don't speak my mind, well, then, first of all, I won't stick my foot in my mouth and have someone identify that I have my foot deep in my mouth. And every time I've stuck my foot in my mouth, someone has come along and probably harshly told me that my foot's well lodged in my mouth. But from the standpoint of actually getting people out of pain and getting people to a point where they're really functioning at a high level, I have never seen anything like PRI. Never.
Mhm.
And trust me, like, I have been working really hard to become even close to a decent mover for years.
Right.
Years. And nothing worked until PRI. Nothing. I mean, I've been doing basic DNS exercises.
How many classes have you taken to PRI?
I've taken 5 courses. I did
What was your first one?
Myokin home course,
Okay.
and then respiration home course. Then I went and did TMCC down at your place.
Right.
So I started. I knew that I wasn't going to be coming back to Springfield College last summer. An event went down, and it was identified to me that my tenure track was going to be ended, and that after this year I would have to seek a new job someplace. So I was terrified. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do next. But I know that if you know enough information, that you will find a spot somewhere somehow.
Exactly.
So, I found that out last, let me think, June 3rd last year. And as soon as I found out that I was going to be removed from that institution, I made up my mind, well, I have to study even harder than I ever have because I need to up my game. And the next day, I started watching Myokin. And so June 4th last year, I started watching Myokin. And I thought my head was, I thought my head was going to explode. And it was
I can't imagine taking that home course because I did that in person, and I was like, my brain just exploded as well. It's just like, just so dense.
Well, the great part about the home course, in my opinion, was I got to put it in my computer and I got to hit pause and rewind. And no joke, I actually wrote the entire thing out handwritten on notes. Every single word that James Anderson said in that, I wrote it out word for word.
Right.
And I had a stack of papers that was about 2.5 inches thick by the time I got done with it. But it drilled Myokin in my head. It took me...
Stand skate.
It took me about 2 weeks to watch Myokin. And I watched it for about 7 hours a day in this sweltering little office in my house. And I didn't care. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't do anything except for watch Myokin for 2 weeks.
I love that.
And then as soon as I got done with Myokin, I got the respiration one. And I did the exact same thing, except it took even longer because you know how Ron is, man.
He had like a bajillion analogies that you had to rewind over and over to understand.
Oh, my God, I had to rewind that thing so many times. And I think that if I had a 2.5...
No offense.
Yeah, no offense.
That's literally what he did.
Yeah. I actually understand Ron's teaching style very well because I use the same teaching style in terms of stories and analogies. So
it's great.
Like, I get Ron's teaching style, and some people I think get frustrated with it, but it makes perfect sense to me.
Oh yeah, I agree.
So yeah, I mean, like I think if Myokin's handwritten notes were 2.5 inches thick, respiration was about 3 inches, and
right.
Like basically, and you got to witness me at the TMCC course. I am doing these things as I'm sitting there like a freak, and I don't care. I basically live my entire life, waking hours, doing resets the entire time. The entirety of my life is spent actively doing resets. Yes, I'm doing them right now. My left leg is adducting. I'm on my heel. I'm abducting my right leg. There's my right leg. It's happening right now. My ribs are the best way that I can get them.
That's it, man. That's it.
I'm a freak. I don't know, but I actually learn stuff doing it constantly. I figure it out in my own body. But I'll tell you, like, I did those 2 courses, and then I was doing kind of like almost an apprenticeship with a guy named Mike Roberts at Central Mass PT.
Yep.
He's a brilliant physical therapist, a really awesome guy, and the kind of person that pays it forward and shares everything he knows with you. And I learned the SFMA from him really in person, and in terms of like the DNS stuff, like he's very good with that stuff.
Right. That definitely transitions to the next question. Like,
yep.
Who's been most impactful? Obviously, you went through your whole formal education, but going into the, I guess you could say the other part of the education.
Mm-hmm.
PRI has obviously been a big influence the last couple of years, but Mike Roberts is a big influence on you with SFMA. You're saying?
Yeah.
And just go off of that.
So who's the biggest influence on me?
Just a handful, not just the biggest one.
Sure. John Burke, my MMA coach, is still the greatest influence on me, without a doubt, because he taught me, like, one of his famous quotes is it doesn't matter what you do, you apply the same mindset to it that you apply to your training. Okay, because all the guys I trained with trained like animals, and we were all kind of messes as human beings. And he basically said, if I'm cleaning a toilet, it's going to be the cleanest toilet you've ever seen in your entire life, because I'm going to clean that toilet the same way that I train. And, that makes sense to me. And, it really does. And it's kind of like, well, I don't know whatever the hell it is that I'm going to learn, but I'm going to learn that stuff the same way I train. So it almost doesn't matter what I learn. I'm gonna make it the cleanest toilet you've ever seen. So that mindset is what he put in my head.
Right.
That and it was always easy for me to train hard because I liked it, made me feel good. Okay, it was never easy for me to do other things in life with that kind of focus. So it's almost impossible to try to other people, Ellen Robinson, without a question in my mind. My friend Jason Sawyer, who our lives have paralleled each other in so many ways, it's frightening. He's also a PhD. He is a truly brilliant man who understands nutrition. He's my guy when it comes to nutrition. If I've got a personal, he's my guy. Okay, and then there's so many people that are removed from me that I hadn't even met in person that are just these unbelievable influences. Mel Siff, he's dead. He's been as big an influence on me as possible because, look, some people will say that super training is outdated or something along the. It is not outdated. It is. Yeah, it is. It's all in there, dude. It's all in there. Quite honestly, Bill Hartman, I don't think he has any idea how much of an influence he's been on me. Right. Just simply watching him from afar. Over the last few years at Springfield College, I never did an internship with anybody, ever. I don't know why. I have no explanation for why I didn't do that. But I ultimately came to the conclusion that I think Bill Hartman is the guy that I put more faith in terms of his perspective on the field than anyone. And so I lived vicariously through my students because I just basically, I took all my best students and I said, well, you're going to do an internship in Indiana. And I secretly wanted to know what was going on out there. And I was terrified.
That's the true sleeper cell. That's real. Yeah. That's really what it is.
I was so terrified of Bill Hartman, terrified of this guy, because what things that don't scare me are physical things anymore. I'm not afraid of big dudes that are strong. Right. I'm not afraid. I've been in so many goddamn fights, it's unbelievable. Whatever, you're gonna punch me in the face and knock me out, no big deal. I'll wake up. It's fine.
I'll wake up.
Yeah, it'll be okay. I'll be all right. But intelligence scares me. When people are so far ahead of me, and I'm like, damn, man, I've worked my ass off, and I'm not even close. I think no one intimidated me more than Bill Hartman. And I finally met him this weekend, and he kind of gave me a hug and gave me some really good words of wisdom, and it literally felt like somebody lifted 10,000 pounds off of my shoulders, because he's a really awesome human being, and he kind of validated me in a lot of ways in terms of I'm a very insecure human being, very, very insecure. I always think that I'm going to make a fool of myself, and I keep talking anyways. I keep saying one thing, but I'm always nervous. I really am. And he said a few things that made me feel much more comfortable in my own skin, and I don't know if he really. I think he probably does. He probably what that means to me. But I just want to thank that man for what he represents to me, and then what he said to me and what he did to me this past weekend. So thank you, Bill Hartman.
Nice shout out.
Yeah, your guy, Kevin Neild, I don't think he really understands the level of respect that I have for him.
Right.
Because quite frankly, I don't think that many people in our field are doing all that good of a job. Sorry. I think that there's shit out there that a lot of people, I think that if you're not on the PRI bus, I don't really want to do anything that you're doing at this point. Hey, that's probably a dumb statement to make, but that's how I feel. That's how I honestly feel. And Kevin and you are way ahead of me on this track. And Connor Ryan is another guy. I don't know if he understands how highly I respect him.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know?
Agreed.
And there's other people that I don't even know, but it's like I know that there's Ron Hruska is like God to me. You know what I mean? For real, like what is that guy? What is his
Yeah.
brain? What is that? How is that possible? So it's almost more like, yeah, there's people, but it's more like the notion of what people represent to me, as far as like their work ethic and their talent and their pursuit of everything that is awesome and outside the box.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's no box.
No box.
No box. Good, good. So let's go into the next question. See if I can pull it up on the screen share. What resources? We did talk a little bit about it. Obviously, PRI is obviously on the front of everyone's mind. If you're either for or against it, in my opinion, or you just don't know enough about it. But
Correct.
other than obviously that mindset, just going into the spectrum of strength and conditioning, what resources do you recommend for up and coming trainers? Like basically your undergrads. Like what would you say to them? You know, like if you're not going to be talking to them anymore, what would you say to do? You know.
Well, I think they know that I've told all of them that if they're not jumping into learning some PRI stuff, I think that they're hopelessly lost in many ways. Because I just don't know. Like, PRI works. I don't know how else to say it. It works.
Right.
And it works like every single time if you do it right with the person. You know, some people are hard to coach in it in some ways.
Yep.
Some people don't have an open mind to a level that they need to have an open mind. But look, it works. And look, I use this analogy of dogs scratching on doors because I think that many of the other models out there sometimes work, but almost by accident.
Right.
The same way that, like, if you lock a dog in a room, the dog is going to scratch the damn door. And, you know, at a certain point, you're probably going to open it because it's frustrated. And the dog arrives at the conclusion that scratching at a door is the mechanism for door opening. And it's like, it's not. You know, the knob and the turning and the pulling or the pushing are the mechanisms. And
Continue to scratch.
Yeah, I think Ron figured out the damn mechanisms, and it's like, I don't know, like I see all of these PRI pieces. Like, you ever see like I don't know, like a movie that involves like clock making or like these big gears and mechanisms on these elaborate machines, and it's like, or like a mouse
grinding. Yeah.
Yeah, like you have to turn this one, bang, right there, and then it sets the stage for the next one to be able to spin the other way.
It's funny. We that same night that we went out to that restaurant, I was talking with everyone else, and it's like there's levels to it.
Oh my God,
there's levels to it. Like obviously there's a superficial level that like, oh, you're twisted, so you're asymmetrical. It's much more than that. It's I can't even begin to go into it. We could talk about that for hours and hours, but
let me ask you a question real quick. How many years of diving into PRI do you think it's going to take you to ultimately feel as though you're like, I know PRI pretty well?
Flipping it on me. So I guess I've been going through this for maybe 2.5 years now. But the thing is, I've been exposed to this, and I've been using it every day, pretty much every day for the past couple years. And the very first year, I was always skeptical about it. It's like, there's no way this is the magic bullet. Like, this is too easy. Like, I was exposed to FMS, and I was exposed to like the Sarman Yanda mindset of just stretching and activating and all that. It's like, okay, that makes sense to me on a very superficial level, but like for me to be exposed to PRI from Eric Cressy and for all that, and it's like, this is too straightforward. I don't know if this is the way that it actually is. So I doubted it in actuality, but I still used it. That was the thing. I still used it, but in order for me to master it, that's a completely different question altogether. I mean, I can't extrapolate that much.
Because you've met the big hitters in PRI, and you know how good those people are, and we're chumps compared to them.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I still have way too many questions. I mean, I'm sure you could, if you ask Kevin how many times I walk into the facility and ask him a PRI related question, it's probably almost every time. And it's just, it's like a big Rubik's cube. Like, I'm just trying to figure it all out. Like I can't, well, I can. I obviously understand a little bit more than the average person who's not even exposed to PRI.
Right.
But the thing that gets me the most is, obviously this is a very long side tangent, but how PRI can adjust and alter the test from other philosophies. So like the PRI like mindset of a pelvis that has like torsion, basically anterior and posterior tilt on the left and right, or the right and left respectively, I guess you could say. And then you do a couple different exercises, pull back, glute max, whatever it is, and then your like straight leg raise clears up, and then your deep squat clears up. It's like, okay, well, this clears some FMS scores, and we didn't do any, we didn't do any dead bugs with core engagement. We didn't do leg lowerings or anything like that. And it took maybe 5 minutes, if that.
Yep.
And then they can go into their lifts, like they can do deadlifts now because they're less, there's no pain or whatever it is. Not saying that it clears pain, but it clears movement patterns. So
I'm gonna go ahead and say it clears pain too. Because it's the only thing that's ever I've been in chronic pain forever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in pain right now.
Right.
I gave up on thinking that I'd ever be out of pain. Completely gave up on it.
Now, what kind of pain? Like you're saying pain, but what specifically? Injury-wise, I guess.
Yeah, right trap pain, I guess, neck pain. Like my right trap, I can feel my heart beating in it, like constantly, like the superior medial border, and then extending across the superior aspect of the trap all the way to the outside edge. It's like I can literally feel my heart beating in it. And then it goes right down the lateral head of my right tricep, and it goes right into my pinky finger. And then sometimes it'll spiral up right in behind my eye. I can't tell, it's like one of those sort of nondescript sort of places. But, it's sort of like one of those classical Travell and Simons.
Trigger point referral, yeah.
And, like soft tissue work, I've spent so much money on soft tissue work, it's ridiculous. And it did me about zero good. Zero. And then like literally.
You're just tight here. You're just tight here. Let me release you.
Yep. I put some napkins in my mouth and made ghetto orthodontic occlusion stuff, and my neck pain melted. Yeah. And then I still had left lower back pain, and literally that thing hadn't given up on me until I went through impingement instability. And I demoed
was that in Cali or?
I was in North Carolina. I went to the pelvis in Cali. I demoed maybe the world's ugliest high-intensity serratus squat, and because I'm not a low-threshold kind of guy. I'd like to be, but listen, I got no palate, I got no soft core, whatever, But
I remember at TMCC you were like, I was talking to you and you were saying you got to battle force with the force, and I was like, I don't know if it's quite like that. Ron pointed out to me, I do not have the ability to go low threshold. I don't. Yeah. I don't. Like, I literally don't anatomically because of my palate. And he was kind of like saying, you can go high threshold and get some positive changes. Really?
Oh, yeah, man. Oh, yeah. There's a lot, and there's a lot of pathways that you can take to get good results. And listen, I'm proving it to myself. I'm proving it to myself because.
So I just have to ask how. How would you get a high threshold response that's positive?
Positioning.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's different ways you can knock yourself into position.
Versus melting.
I can get there, but after I've done a lot of repositioning consciously.
Yeah.
Very, very hard for me to do, and I'm starting to figure it out a little bit, but. I think you've seen my palate, and it basically doesn't even exist. It really does. It's like I think my palate actually ends right here. I think that's. It looks like a black hole. I open my mouth, and people are like, "Where does it end?" It's crazy.
Just keeps on going.
It's funny, I met my sisters this weekend again, and she has the same damn mouth I do.
Really?
Oh yeah,
So it's genetic related, not
it seems to be. I
interesting.
haven't seen anybody else with the same
Do you
mouth.
sleep with a mouth guard to stick on the subject for a little bit more? Do you sleep with one now or
I
no?
don't because the mouth guard doesn't really fit my mouth at all. But
We'll get one.
well, Bill was telling me that Under Armour's making a new mouth guard that's kind of like a lower molar buildup. That's what I need. I read the orthodontistry article at the end of the TMCC manual.
Yeah.
And, it was just sort of showing like if people have, I've got something called the angle of Spee, which is where my top molars and bottom molars curve away from each other. And for patients that go to orthodontistry,
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
they give you like molar implants. They just
So you
build
contact.
up. Exactly.
Right,
So,
right.
like, well, I'm very bad with money, and I haven't saved any money, and now I don't have health insurance because I'm out of a job. So, let me just tinker around and try things. So I just took paper towels. I prefer the Bounty paper towel. But literally, I just fold them up, and then I just put them in my mouth, and, it basically looks like this, if you can see that. Like, this is just a paper towel, and I'll put it in my mouth like this. Now I've got dental occlusion.
It looks like you had your wisdom teeth taken out for like a minute.
Yeah, but I sleep with those things in my mouth, and I remember when I first started doing that, my girlfriend was kind of like, "Are you crazy? You're gonna fall into your throat and you're gonna choke yourself when you do that." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll probably wake up if that happens. I'm not too worried about it."
Right.
I sleep with those things in my mouth, and I'll tell you what, like,
You feel better? What?
yeah, like I do my high threshold PRI, and it does make me feel better. It does. It works. It makes me feel better. I can't go low threshold. I've accepted that about myself. I'll be able to go. What Ron said was I'll be able to go low threshold after I have probably multiple palate surgeries and then heavy wiring of my maxillary teeth
What the heck?
for 3 years. Okay.
After.
After palate surgery, 3 years of heavy wiring.
Wow.
I showed a couple. I showed the PRI instructors in California my mouth, and Jesse Ham was like, "Oh man, that's the worst palate I've ever seen."
That's not very encouraging.
No, it's not. But I was like, well, in some ways it's refreshing because I literally did everything I could. Like, I'm telling you, I've tried everything to improve my mobility and stability.
Yeah, exactly, right?
And nothing ever worked. And if stretching and yoga like just worked, it would have worked.
And we would have stuck with that. We've been doing that,
Yeah, but I'll tell you, like I sleep with those things in, and I don't wake up with horrendous thoracic and neck pain. And a couple times I've been traveling and I have not had access to paper towels, and I've had to sleep with them not in my mouth, and I wake up and I'm like a stiff that's in pain. It's horrible.
So, Pat, let's really quick. It just completely skipped my mind that obviously the general coach is not going to understand one damn thing we just talked about.
That's fine. Who cares?
With regards to TMCC, can you give a quick gloss over about TMCC and the orthodontics that we just talked about?
I'll do my best, man. You know how much of a can of worms that is, but I guess that what we can
just
say.
Talk about position.
Yeah. Reference points are a big deal.
What are they?
Reference points, they are. All right. So I understand this through my understanding of space science, space and time science. So it's kind of like everything needs an anchor somewhere to be able to have other things move around it appropriately.
Makes sense.
I think of the Milky Way galaxy, and there is a supermassive black hole in the middle of the Milky Way, and if the monster of the Milky Way is not providing the anchor for our galaxy, we don't have the appropriate spiral spin around it, and our galaxy would just fall apart, And the astrophysicists, when they discovered that every galaxy in the universe that we've identified has a black hole in the center of it, they were terrified. They thought that, oh my God, we have a black hole in the middle of our galaxy. It's going to suck us into it immediately. We're all dead. Wait, it's been there for 100 billion years or however long it's been there.
Yeah.
It's probably there for a purpose, and it's kind of the reference and the anchor for our entire galaxy to work around. So it's sort of like our bodies. I do not understand these reference centers physiologically, like on watching. Like I really don't. Like I need to, I don't know, talk to smarter people, do a hell of a lot more reading. But ultimately, it appears as though there are certain points of contact for our body that we have to feel and be aware of. The brain needs to have references. It needs to have certain things physically touch and to have sensory information coming from those areas.
Right.
So I don't know, maybe as babies we all find a pathway to where we hit very specific points. Left heel, right arch, left eye PTAs, that right sort of low trap region, the roof of the mouth with the tongue touching the teeth. If you hit those things, I think you develop and move authentically to the point where you have locomotion. And hey, maybe I'm fucking wrong. I don't know. I'm sure I'm saying dumb things in some level that somebody knows are dumb, but it's probably one guy that knows it's dumb, but whatever. So
how does reference centers refer to the TMCC and the jaw, skull?
Yeah. So it's kind of like developmentally, if your tongue is on the roof of your mouth and it's creating the appropriate forces muscularly on your mandible will grow at an appropriate rate and your teeth will erupt at an appropriate level, which will give you proper occlusion with your adult teeth. And your teeth will, in fact, rest comfortably on each other, providing occlusion. And that occlusion creates muscular balance down the road throughout your entire body. And apparently if you're thinking about it's all brain stuff, it's all sensory homunculi talking to motor homunculi, and it's like your sensory homunculi, like what is your brain, first of all? Like that's a question that has to be asked.
Yeah.
The brain is an evolutionary strategy that organisms utilize to make sense of the external environment and the internal environment. The external environment is the world that we live in. The internal environment is the insides of our body. And the internal environment is based on kinesthetic awareness for humans at a very high level. We're moving creatures. So it's kind of like you need to send information from the body to the brain so that the brain knows what's going on. And if the brain is comfortable, it kind of takes the governor off your engine. So the brain is just seeking, it's an information-seeking thing.
Exactly.
It takes information and it processes it, and then it provides a command to your body. The entire point of the brain, amino acids came first on this planet, and amino acids gave rise to nucleic acids. RNA appeared to be first. RNA gave rise to DNA. DNA's goal is to live forever. It's an eternal thing. It's the eternal coil. Okay? So DNA is trying to reproduce. It's trying to replicate itself so that it can live forever. It is immortal. It is the only thing that is immortal, and DNA seeks vessels to ride around in. It originally found some kind of a protoplasm cellular membrane that it could live inside, and that was a better strategy for it to be able to be immortal. And then ultimately it kind of teamed up with bacteria that were mitochondria, and that gave it a better option. And then it became multicellular, and it said, oh, okay, I'm DNA here, and I'm DNA there, and I'm DNA everywhere. And then it kind of made it led to the development of claws and teeth and things of that nature. And then it ultimately arrived at like a brain, and the whole point of the brain is that it allows you to process information and to be able to make better decisions as to how to best facilitate the ongoing passage of DNA onto the next generation.
Right.
Okay, so your brain is a tool that your DNA utilizes,
Right.
and DNA is more concerned about your cells than anything else. And ultimately it's like this, like your cells are the reason that you're hungry is because certain cells in your body aren't receiving enough energy, and when they don't receive enough energy, they cannot allow ATP resynthesis and protein synthesis. What does DNA do? It replicates itself and it drives protein synthesis, and the only way it can drive protein synthesis is through ATP resynthesis. I know that I'm going on, but trust me, I know where I'm going with this. So the brain is just an evolutionary strategy that will ultimately allow you to better provide energy for cells, and cells compete against each other in our bodies. It is, if you read Richard Dawkins' stuff, he likes to use the analogy of the friendly forest, and the friendly forest does not exist because every tree that lives in a forest is competing against its neighbor. Okay, every cell that lives in your body is essentially competing against its neighbor. Now, some organs essentially have their cells team up in much the same way that multiple guys rowing in a canoe are teaming up to be able to row the canoe faster because it works better for each guy. But we are cellular-based creatures, and the cell drives everything, and the cell wants what it wants. And the cells compete against each other, and they don't share. And so it's kind of like the cells aren't interested in the other cells around the body. What's our financial? It's not communism. It's the other thing. Capitalism. We have capitalist bodies.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you have to appreciate what the brain is for and what it really is. And it's just simply a tool that cells use to give themselves a better chance. Because the DNA is ultimately the driver, and the DNA wants to live forever, and the brain gives the DNA a better chance to live forever. So it's like you have to appreciate that with everything that we do. The reason that cancer exists and other terminal diseases exist, there are codes in your DNA that can be activated that create cancer in your body. And the reason that cancer is created is because the brain has read the internal environment, and it has determined that the internal environment is no longer very conducive to you being able to pass your DNA off to another generation. So it kind of comes up with this strategy, well, I'm going to kill this vessel, and if the vessel is dead, then the body will essentially decompose and the DNA will melt into the ground, and ultimately maybe we can have DNA mix in with other creatures in soil, and there's a chance that we can survive, the DNA will survive your dead body, because your body sucks, okay? So what is health and wellness? Health and wellness is creating a good, and when I say internal environment, I'm speaking very specifically to the interstitial fluid, the bath, what the great French physiologist Claude Bernard called the internal milieu. It is the bath that the cells bathe in, for lack of a better term, and the cells are reading the bath, and they send messages to the brain. The brain interprets the messages, and the brain executes commands. And essentially it's like this. If you are an insulin-insensitive slob and you have a terrible chemical environment inside your body, your brain will not reward you. And it will not keep you alive, and in fact, it will kill you. It will execute lethal codes to be activated in your DNA. So my philosophy is that I am a DNA-based guy. Okay, ultimately, at the very end of it all, I am a DNA kind of guy, and I just try to study what the optimal internal environment is. And in my mind, we already have the model because primitive humans had optimal internal environments. Okay, I am a paleo guy. I hate the word because it's associated with CrossFit. I know we got a CrossFit question, but okay, it's like.
From a primitive point of view.
Yeah, there's a lot, like the model is already there, and I've been having this discussion with Sam Leahy for weeks and weeks and weeks. I'm like, I don't need a lot of the data that you say is important because I already know what the model is, and the model is in nature, and all you have to do is look around. Every wild mammal on Earth has the exact same lipid profile, the exact same blood sugar, the exact same triglyceride levels. Every newborn baby has the exact same lipid profile, the exact same blood sugar levels. The only mammals that have ever existed with an alternate blood sugar and lipid profile are the creatures that we are as the creatures of Western civilization and modernism. Okay? We have royally effed ourselves really hard, and it's like I look at strength and conditioning from an evolutionary perspective. I look at nutrition from an evolutionary perspective. I dislike registered dietitians because they follow silly recommendations that are handed down to them from the McGovern Committee, Ansel Keys stuff from the 50s, and it's foolish and it's stupid. And literally, the Inuit of Alaska eat whale blubber and bear meat and seals and stuff like that, and they have like no heart disease. And it's literally just, there are so many ways that wild humans have been able to eat and be successful. All you have to do is eat real food. That's really it. It's so stupid. And then from a training and strength perspective, think about what you would have had to have done 20,000 years ago. And that's why I really like strongman, because strongman to me is just these tasks and like things that maybe you would have had to have done in nature. Oh, there's a boulder that's stuck on my buddy's leg. I need to pick it up off of him. And it's kind of like old school farming. Like, hey, we have to build a wall with rocks. Let's put the rock up on top of the wall. They're not thinking about, oh, I killed a deer and I need to drag it backward sled drag. Oh, I have, I got to put this log up on top of something. Log clean and jerk.
Nice.
So, yeah, and I've read a lot of Ivan Abadjiev, the Bulgarian weightlifting coach, and what he talks about with training as weightlifters is that we are predators. Humans are predators, eyes in the front, prey, eyes on the side. And if you study lions hunting on the Serengeti, does a lion chase a zebra today at 85%? No, of course not. Yeah, it's like, I want to eat that zebra. I am sore today, but whatever. I have to kill the zebra. I'll suck it up and I'll go get it. And some days the lion kills the zebra, and other days it doesn't kill the zebra. But the intention is always 100% kill the zebra. And I look at training the same way, and that's kind of why I've never really bothered to actually measure heart rate variability, because I don't care what it is. Maybe today I don't even feel like training, so I won't train. But maybe I don't feel like training and I will train, but I'm going to try to kill the zebra today, and tomorrow I'll try to kill the zebra. And I think about shitty jobs that I had as a kid doing landscape construction, and I worked for 8 hours on day one, and I wake up the next day and I can't even squeeze my hands to begin the day. But if you wake up and you go to work and you just start, by noon you feel okay. And then by the end of the day, you're exhausted, and you're like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this again tomorrow. But you wake up, and you have to do it because, when I'm loading stones in training, all I'm picturing is that I got hired for the world's weirdest job. And if I don't put the stone on top of the box, I'm not going to eat. And you find a way. And I have a different perspective somewhere.
Billy Rom had a good question about this is obviously, we're getting more into the questions that people ask. He said, what methods do you use to help in the transfer of weight room strength to on-field performance? This is obviously a little bit different since you're training indoors, but you're training the event, so it's a little more specific, I guess.
Well, I think the lesson learned, I love Zach Hadge. He's one of my favorite humans ever. He is I just love everything about the guy. I don't know how else to say it. He's pure. He is so pure, and he loves to lift weights as much as I like, or maybe even more. Maybe more. And, when we competed in our first national championships 2 years ago together, we both bombed events badly. Okay, I'm a good deadlifter, and I
Mm-hmm.
got 0 reps in the car deadlift, and I was humiliated. And I'm looking around, and I'm seeing guys that I'm like, I'm stronger than those guys, and those guys pulled the car for like 12. What the hell happened? And Zach just comes over to, and because he bombed on the stone, he bombed on the dumbbell, and he bombed on 2 events. He got zeros on 2 events,
Mm-hmm.
and he was stronger than anybody by a large margin in the 200-pound class. But he came over to me, and at the end of the day, he was like, "Strong at what?" And I just sat there, and we were bummed, man. We were so bummed because we were just like kind of disappointed, and because I was in like third place going into the second to last event, the car deadlift, and I was thinking maybe I'm going to win the national championship. And I got 0 reps, and I went from third place to 15th place.
Mm-hmm.
Then I clawed my way back into finishing ninth with the final event, but I was like so bummed because, hey, when do you ever get a chance to win a national championship in anything? And I was so goddamn close, and it just went to shit. And so, we went back to the drawing board after that one. It was kind of like
Right.
this
What?
realization,
Yeah. How do you
like
approach it?
like specificity is so dominant, it's unbelievable. And so it's kind of like, and the way that I think about this is, uh, picture you have a test in organic chemistry, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and you read War and Peace. War and Peace is this tremendously intellectual book that will make you smarter and give you tremendous perspective on the world. Unfortunately, that intelligence is not going to translate over to your organic chemistry midterm. You're smarter, but you're not smarter in the exact thing that you need to be smarter in.
Right.
Okay? And I've talked about it in some articles with like
Yeah.
basketball versus soccer. Basketball and soccer are essentially the same sport. You replace your feet with your hands and you elevate the goal. And the athletes don't look the same, but it's almost the same sport. Uh, it's totally different. And you'd be an idiot if you had to coach a seventh grade basketball team and you practice with soccer, But from a strength and conditioning perspective, we do this stuff all the time, I think. We don't really, it's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is a great exercise. Yeah, it is a great exercise. But stronger at what? Um, so I'm not saying I have the answer for this stuff because look, what a disaster, a lot of weighted baseball throwing has been. If you don't know exactly what you're doing. I think that in many ways it's kind of like you have to be a master in anatomy and physiology. You have to be a master in actually hands-on training in the weight room, and
Right.
you probably have to be a master at the sport we're talking about if you really want to be able to actually utilize specificity. And the interesting thing about the Soviet developmental model is that the only way that you could be an international level coach in that paradigm was if you had competed as an international masters of class level athlete in the PASM process, and you had acquired a PhD from one of the physical culture schools, and that was the only way you could be a coach of an Olympic level team.
That's phenomenal.
So yeah, I mean, I look at it like I don't pretend that I'm able to necessarily coach every athlete from every discipline. I know
Mm-hmm.
that I can coach strongman athletes, and I think that I do a good job because I've got the hands-on experience. I've gone through the process of acquiring a PhD, and I understand basic sciences.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hungry to learn more, and that's kind of where it's at. So specifically with Paul's question or these questions about like
Yeah.
uh,
That was Billy. Billy.
transferring over to the field, I'll drop this one little thing on you that uh, PRI is the thing that's made me feel pretty athletic and agile again. I feel like I could go out and play flag football at a high level today. Uh, I think you might have
How's
a
that?
well,
Don't want to get into that.
yeah, look, I can actually move a little bit these days. I'm not saying it's great, but compared to what it was a month ago, dramatically better.
Really?
So dramatic, it's kind of scary. Yeah.
I've seen your Facebook videos, but is that what you're referring to, or are you talking about like sprinting, shuffling, all that?
I'm talking about sprinting and shuffling and athletic things that would be involved with team sports stuff.
Right. Right.
Uh, I'm almost at the point where I'm like, I don't think we really need to do all of these lateral and linear days anymore. Uh, I think you get strong, and I think you do PRI, and I think that that is locomotion science applied to force production. Okay, I mean I've read everything that Verkhoshansky has ever written.
Right.
And,
Well, yeah.
it's like kinetics is much more specific to transfer of training than kinematics. Kind of doesn't matter what the damn thing looks like. What are the forces into the ground that sprinting involves? Well, they're pretty damn similar to the forces of squatting. Okay? Maybe not the
Force,
rate of
force is
force.
force.
Force is force. But then it's like, well, what is PRI? And it's impossible to say PRI is this, it's that. It's PRI is all encompassing in many ways. But PRI is locomotion science. It's gait. And if
Right.
you have cleaner gait, I mean, look, what are the dirty little secrets? We can't even stand on our goddamn right legs properly. Nobody can walk right. Everybody sucks. Face it, like everybody sucks.
So if you can get neutral, then what?
Then what? So it's like, let me dump a whole lot of force on you. Let me develop your energy systems.
Right.
And then let me do PRI with you and give you better and more efficient gait. And it's kind of like I'm probably wrong when I say this, but I think that locomotion is the only real motor program that matters in some ways. And almost every other thing is kind of an offshoot off of locomotion.
And
So
when you say locomotion, you're referring to like gait and walking and
yeah,
not being stuck in an asymmetrical stance.
correct. Yeah. So I just look at it like, what are we trying to do with training? We're trying to increase force. We're trying to training. The purpose of training is to create structural and functional adaptations in an organism.
Right.
And a structural adaptation for our field is primarily protein synthesis or mitochondrial biogenesis. And
Right.
a functional adaptation is, well, you put more force into the force plate. You
Right.
run faster, you jump higher. The functional.
Then the other person. Is
Yep.
Really.
So it's like what kind of structural adaptations are we trying to get? Well, we're trying to make neurons in the brain that are cleaner gait and locomotion based neurons fire together.
Right.
And
I mean, yeah.
get them to fire together for many, many times in a row. They'll wire together, and then it'll be subconscious. And if I can get you a very clean subconscious gait change that makes you more efficient, and then I dump more force on you and I improve your energy systems, well, that's strength and conditioning.
There you go. That's it. So we have some other specific questions. Let's talk about, since we're talking about breathing already, let's just talk about Kevin O'Neill's question.
Yes, yeah.
I'll only try to remind you, Pat, to not go off for like we can talk about this maybe for a couple hours.
Yeah.
Let's try not to do that, I guess.
I'll do my best here. Like
Please explain.
Sometimes people think that a question has a straightforward answer.
Yeah, right.
And Jesus, does this not have a straightforward answer? And the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. Well, sometimes you can make it so simple that you lose the point of the thing completely.
Right, Albert Einstein say, make it simple but not any simpler.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I will, I promise.
Kevin O'Neill, please explain the correlation between proper diaphragmatic breathing and one's ability to produce maximal strength. I think you like this question.
Yeah, I got you, Kevin. I got you. So we have to breathe or you'll die, and your brain will figure out a way to breathe under just about any possible circumstance you can. Like, I don't know about you, but humans amaze me, especially old people and really jacked up people, because it's kind of like, how the hell are you even existing? Like, that's unbelievable. The level of compensation that your body has acquired is unbelievable. But animals compensate too. I grew up with raising dogs, and I've seen dogs lose legs, I've seen dogs lose ears. I've seen them lose eyes. I've seen them lose claws, and they don't know anything about this stuff, and they make do, and they figure out a way. And I've seen jacked up dogs win dog fights against normal dogs. Okay, I've seen the most dysfunctional dudes beat up the most functional dudes. And I've seen the most jacked up dudes lift more weights than the most functional dudes. Okay? Does that mean that that's the best way? No. Okay? There is always optimal. There is always, I believe that there is always one answer that is supreme over all other answers. And I think that there is ultimately one truth and that all other things are close but not quite. I do believe that PRI is the truth. Okay? So it's like this, very simply, you will inhale somehow, okay? The best and most authentic way to inhale is through a diaphragmatic concentric action, where we go from, like you have to appreciate that breathing is based on Boyle's law, and that law is volume and pressure. As the chest cavity's volume increases, the pressure decreases, and when the pressure decreases below that of the ambient atmosphere, air will fall into the body like a vacuum. And then as the volume of air increases inside the chest cavity, the pressure will ultimately reverse, okay? And we will move, like air just moves from where it's highly concentrated to where it's lowly concentrated. So if the pressure inside your body is greater than the ambient pressure, air will move out of you in an exhale, okay? By hook or by crook, you know, path of least resistance stuff. So what we know now through the, you know, the zone of apposition based science, okay.
Diaphragm, maximal
The diaphragm, look, I'm going to make a fist. That's a pretty good fist, okay? Now I'm going to flex my wrist and I'm going to make a fist. Oh God, my hand's cramping. Nobody wants to get hit by this thing. I still have a pretty good right hand. If I hit you with this thing, I'm going to break my hand. It's going to be a mess.
Right.
Okay? Position determines the level that a muscle can function at more than anything, I think.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, neuroposition is fascinating. It's just fascinating. And it's kind of like the diaphragm's a weird animal because, well, what kind of muscle is the diaphragm? Is it conscious? Is it unconscious? Is it both? Is it this? Is it that?
Right.
But regardless of what it is, it functions at a high level if it's positioned properly, and it functions at a low level if it's not positioned properly. And if you are not in a proper position, then it will be ineffective as an inhalation engine. And like I said, you will die if you don't breathe. So you will use whatever muscles that you could possibly use to pull air into your body. And, you know, some of the big hitters are things like your traps and your scalenes and your SCMs and all this jazz up here in the neck.
Right.
And it's kind of like, hey, look, spinal erectors too. And I think we probably use our feet and our toes. You know, whatever. I got big, crooked, jacked up feet and toes. I bet I've been breathing with my damn feet and my toes.
Web feet, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah, gross. But ultimately, it's like breathing. You're gonna breathe, and that's more important than just about anything. So what are you breathing with? And if you're breathing with your traps, well, guess what? They're working all day, and think about it this way. If I have to work 2 jobs, I'm gonna be exhausted and I'm gonna be miserable and I'm gonna tighten up and it's gonna suck. And literally all somebody needs to do is just like take the burden off of me and my life will probably be better. And that's kind of like what we're talking about with all this stuff. Like your traps shouldn't be breathing, and now they're doing their best job they possibly can. They're trying to help you out. They're like a good buddy. They're kind of like the lactate system in many ways, okay? So it's sort of like give them a break. And the only way you can give them a break is if you get back to the authentic diaphragmatic inhalation, and it's not a goddamn belly breath, okay? Okay? It is one, like, apposition, I had to look this thing up online once I heard the term. Apposition refers to when two things are adjacent to each other, one dictates the function of the other. So the apposition is the lateral portions of the diaphragm that should be adjacent to the rib cage. And when the lateral parts of the diaphragm do not have good association with the rib cage, well, then the doming and the flattening won't function properly. That will cause diaphragmatic breathing, and ultimately you will resort to other things. So the thing is that you have to get your rib cage in the proper position for the diaphragm to be able to work. And once the rib cage is in position, the diaphragm is a good fist, and it will function as it should have originally. And it's like this, man. If we want to talk yanda, we're talking tonic and phasic muscles. And you know, your phasic muscles, they're not supposed to be these postural animals, and they're not supposed to be like stabilizing. And you want these tiny little tonic, deep guys to be your stabilizers, and you want your phasic distal, sort of superficial big bad boys. They should be chilling out all day until it's time to kill the zebra.
Right.
You know.
Okay.
So
how does restoring that zone of apposition, how does restoring that transfer to your sport, to maximal strength?
Gotcha. Okay, so Matt Viev, the Russian weightlifting author and Russian weightlifting coach, as far as I know, he was kind of the first strength science dude to identify the fact that inhibition rate is the chief differentiating factor between different classifications of athletes. The great athletes in weightlifting are not the guys who excite their fibers faster than other guys. The shitty guys excite their fibers just as fast as the great ones. The great ones are able to pulse, as McGill calls it, or transition from excitation to inhibition. The inhibition rate is the chief determining factor. We have two systems that can potentially inhibit you. We have cranial nerves that are inhibitory animals, and we have a ventilatory system that is capable of inhibition. The exhalation process is a parasympathetic-driven phenomenon, and if we have a really good exhale, then we are able to have an autonomic shift because we are tinkering with autonomics. The diaphragm, in many ways, is the link between the conscious and the unconscious.
Right.
The somatic and the autonomic, and it is something that you can't fire your diaphragm consciously, but you can fire muscles that are associated with assisted expiration, and those muscles attach to structures like the rib cage and the pelvis. And if you make those muscles fire appropriately concentric, they will reposition the rib cage.
It's in a position.
The pelvis. And if we reposition a pelvis and a rib cage, we create a zone of apposition. And if we have a zone of apposition, we inhale with the diaphragm effortlessly, which I would love to be able to do.
So let me ask you, have you're obviously familiar with the technique of the breathing, inhale, exhale, and then there is a pause aspect as well. You're familiar with that. Have you been able to shift yourself or anyone else with those techniques, like non-manually? Okay.
Oh yeah, man.
Right.
Not even that hard, and I'm a chump.
That's what. Okay, I'm just trying to get that across. That might not be the case for others. Like they might not understand how even that simple. Like okay, we could obviously understand the inhale. You might use accessory muscles in order to inhale. The exhalation is a point that many people don't understand. It's like I'm exhaling my air, but you didn't exhale all of it. Is really the subtext there.
Correct.
Even more subtext, right? There's levels to this.
And we're talking chemicals here too. Yeah, we're talking driving acidity when you exhale and pause. That's an acid driver,
right?
And that acidity will change this shitty sort of pulmonary circulatory alkaline condition that we all live in as hyperinflated individuals. Right. And that acid concentration is read by chemoreceptors, which talk to the nucleus tractus solitarius in the brain, and the NTS will ultimately speak with the kind of like the the three-pronged monster of the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and the medulla, and that conversation that ultimately talks to the medulla will ultimately give us the ability to tap into the vasomotor control centers, the depressor center, which is the parasympathetic controller of arterial tone. Look, it's like this, like these nervous changes are instant, okay? And nervous is speaking to electrical and chemical phenomena, okay? We are altering your proprioceptive input to your brain through positioning, and we are altering your chemoreceptor discussion with your brain through altering your acid-base balance with this exhalation pause system. Okay? So those are the mechanisms that lead to inhibition. Okay? And when we talk inhibition, we are simply talking autonomics. We are talking parasympathetic. And look, all of those muscles that are tight and that are limiting your biomechanics, the only way you're going to improve your biomechanics if you're a big dumb stiff like me is through inhibition. Okay? The only chance you got. Okay? So we are seeking inhibition, and as James Anderson kind of alludes to in Myokin, any jerk can excite. It takes some serious specialized knowledge to inhibit. And an inhibition is the thing that we are all after. You don't even know it, but you feel good when you get inhibition. And, you know, a sympathetic freak like me, the only way that I can really gain inhibition is to go so sympathetic through exercise that chemically I have a response that gives me parasympathetic action after. Why do I like exercise so much? Because it's the only damn way I can chemically cheat myself into getting something parasympathetic. Incredibly.
Very good points.
So do you want to lift more weights? Yes. How do you lift more weights? Well, anybody that's ever lifted at a high level of contest caliber understands that biomechanics is the king. You know, I've been beaten by 14-year-old boys in weightlifting contests who I'm significantly stronger than and have greater protein synthesis than, but they are dirty in their technical delivery of their lifts.
I like that.
You know, and it's like, why? Well, you know, they didn't. Who the hell knows on some levels? But you know, they had no business lifting more weight than me, but they did because their biomechanics are good. Why? Because they have better inhibition rates. Why? Because they have more neutrality in their autonomics.
Right. Makes sense.
You know, you see where these things are cans of worms.
Right, exactly. So autonomics would lead to, you know, inhibition. Inhibition would lead to biomechanics.
Biomechanics leads to training movements properly as opposed to just grinding.
And just going after it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Let's move on to the next one. Kind of related, but kind of not. Not that it really matters, but Nick Deacon talk. He had a couple questions. Let's see if I can kind of mash them together. Concurrent programming.
Correct.
And how to manage fatigue of various body systems, and what you're looking for with regards to these topics.
Okay.
So it's kind of
you might have to remind me about the fatigue thing after
Okay. Go off.
So if you read Super Training, you quickly learn that there are two models of program design, and there are only two models. There are concurrent designs, and there are conjugate sequencing system designs. And a concurrent design is that and look, I can't identify all these things in terms of vocabulary, but we have strength qualities. Think there's slow grinder strength, and then there's this kind of, for lack of a better term, explosive strength, rate of force development kind of jazz. Concurrent approaches, and then we have different energy systems, you know what I'm saying? Like we have, you know, all. So we're going to just mash all of our energy systems and all of our strength qualities and all of our movement directionality stuff into, you know, your weekly training cycle. And there is no focus placed on anything. We're training everything equally. And this is the appropriate model for intermediate level athletes, not beginners and not advanced, intermediate.
Right.
Okay. And here's why. beginners need focus, believe it or not, and they need focus on what Zatsiorsky calls the repetition effort method. Okay? Zatsiorsky identifies that you should be lifting for approximately 3 years before you utilize the max effort method or the dynamic effort method. That we need global, equal kinds of muscular development, and that the appropriate way. And listen, the thing is, Zatsiorsky's talking about 9-year-olds going into weightlifting.
It's not gonna happen here.
So you have to,
yeah,
you have to appreciate that perspective. And Zatsiorsky also basically said maybe not even the repetition effort method, because that one's defined as submaximal loads lifted to failure, but probably the submaximal effort method, which he identifies as submaximal weights lifted to a point below failure. Okay, so it's kind of like lift fairly light things that don't really challenge your limits when you're a beginner, and accumulate volume. And if you want a good example of how to do that, read Pavel's stuff.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's kind of like that is a conjugate model. That is a conjugate. We are focusing, in fact, on the submaximal effort method, and we are focusing on teaching and technique, and it's not even training necessarily at that point. It's teaching and learning. Okay. Then once you become an intermediate level athlete, the appropriate school of thought is to use a concurrent method, which is we're just going to hit you with everything all at once. Everything. There's no reason to focus.
Specify, right?
Yeah, and I like that because it fits in with what we believe in terms of what's appropriate for specialization for children. Okay, right. Children need to be taught basics first, and they don't need this. Children respond very well to volume and very poorly to intensity. And intensity for children is playing in a basketball game where there's a scoreboard and a referee and lights and parents. And there's very little volume in those scenarios because the whistle blows every 2 seconds, and how much activity do you actually get? They need to be out experimenting and tinkering and playing games and learning life lessons and dealing with that. So, and then ultimately, when you're, ready for it, sure, let's play some real deal games. But you should play lots of sports when you're a teenager. Lots. No focus. Right. And then ultimately, well, you're a stud 18-year-old, and you're going to go to college, and now it's time to focus because adults need focus. They do. We need focus as adults because you identify, I think that this is the thing that I really like in life, and if you're going to ever get good at one particular thing, it requires focus. The same way that I was talking about War and Peace versus studying for a biochemistry.
Right.
General knowledge won't help you at a certain point. Specific knowledge will. And as an adult, specific training is going to be the only thing that will really get you to an extremely high level. Focus will improve your ability in one thing tremendously, and there's very little carryover between different qualities in many ways. Conjugate sequencing models are, if you want to be the greatest in the world, you have to utilize this. I love the way that Cal Dietz talks about the problems with coaches in our country, because we all start with some kind of a concurrent model, and it works very well in the initial training blocks, and then you believe that that is the solution to all of your strength training problems and questions, and no, it's not. It works well at one point, and then you need to switch gears, and now you need to focus, because the only way that you're ever going to push your limit strength to the levels of elite international competition is to concentrate on that quality for a block. It has to be that way. And of course, Verkhoshansky is the genius that demonstrated that the order of blocks is critical. Critical. And I think Joel Jamieson has demonstrated that the order of his blocks is critical. And then you have to test people to identify which block they really should start in. And you have to identify the energy system demands of the sport. And you have to proceed along these lines through what he calls power and capacity. And really, I read a very similar book to his that was written by D.B. Hammer in the 90s. And it was, the best training book ever, I think was the title of it. And it had very poorly translated into English. But D.B. Hammer called it Pinnacle versus Peak, I believe. And Same concept, and it's just simply saying it's talking about how to get like think of pinnacle as a closer in baseball, and peak as a starting pitcher.
Right.
So that pinnacle stuff is you only need to come in and throw 100 miles an hour for like 20 pitches versus
Right.
like you need to work around like 93% for the whole game. Um, and the fatigue is very different between those two things. And they were looking
Right.
at drop-offs, this, that, the other thing. But you have to, and the other thing that DB Hammer talked about was these zones of timing for training. And like if you identify phosphagen zone 1 and phosphagen zone 2, glycolytic 1, glycolytic 2, oxidative 1, oxidative 2. So like phosphagen 1 would be like 3 seconds, 1 to 3 seconds of work. Phosphagen 2 would be like 4 to 10 or 12. And if you want to get better fitness-wise in phosphagen zone 1, you actually have to train and maximize phosphagen zone 2. And
Right.
so you always train in the zone above the thing that you're trying to get better at, and then you peak and taper in the zone that's actually the thing. So you peak and taper in phosphagen zone 1 at the end of the training cycles, but you build the foundations for phosphagen zone 1 through training primarily in phosphagen zone 2.
Makes
So
sense.
identify a shot putter needs to spend a lot of time training in phosphagen zone 2 until ultimately it's their taper phase where they move into phosphagen zone 1. But that's your conjugate sequencing model where you move through these different zones. And so it's a rotation of means of energy systems, and it's a rotation of means of strength qualities. And each sport has the exact right energy system and the exact right strength quality and movement patterns, and you just slide your pendulum from away from those exact zones towards those exact zones, and you taper by being in the exact zone in the block right before contest. And a lot of people seem to miss that in terms of the truly basic underlying scientific foundations of that.
That's pretty interesting. How would you manage fatigue of the body systems? I'm assuming he's obviously just talking about exactly like you were saying, the different energy systems on top of the nervous system, which we obviously talked quite a bit about already. So just maybe go off on the
yeah. Well, I think that fatigue changes everything, and I spoke of reference zones earlier. That if you have all of your authentic reference zones, you are kind of out of pain and you move really well. And if you lose those reference zones, you're in pain and you're kind of dysfunctional now and you're sort of a mess. So it's like this. Like if you are working really hard in training, you will fatigue, and then fatigue is what is the first thing that takes place in response to fatigue? The first thing is that your proprioceptive input to the brain is altered, and it's never in a positive way. It always leads to efferent feedback that will lead to these inappropriate firing patterns and sequencing, and that is ultimately what leads to the drop-off in power, which is the second thing that takes place with fatigue. And ultimately, you can fatigue yourself to the point where your reference zones are lost, and now you're kind of a mess. So you have to be very careful with fatigue. And I think that fatigue is best accumulated in a manner where during the set that you're working in, I don't want to fatigue you too badly. I want to leave plenty in your tank, but we're going to do a whole lot of sets. And that way, it sneaks up on you. I love Pavel, and he kind of talks about sneaky fatigue. It's like by the end of the day, you've done a ton of volume. Volume is the thing that will drive fitness. It drives fatigue too, but once you remove fatigue from the equation, you get to see your fitness. But we celebrate and glorify, and this is delving into CrossFit, of course, but we celebrate and glorify people doing these glycolytic horror shows, and I'm no different, because I know that if I need to advertise myself and market myself in things like social media, I need to show things that people will think are impressive, okay? And it's like, that's the bullshit, you know what I mean? The real stuff is the stuff that I look like a cold-faced Soviet soldier doing my lifts, and and it's like I stop well short of fatigue. Um, and it's those are I'm gonna do a lot of sets where I'm clean and not fatiguing myself in the set, and the volume sneaks up on you.
Yeah.
And uh, and by the end of the training block, you have fatigued the ever living shit out of yourself, and you will then need I hate deloads for the most part. I think they're the most poorly misunderstood thing. Well, I don't want to say that because so many things are poorly misunderstood, but deloads are poorly misunderstood. What the hell are you deloading from? You know, if you understand, like I'm not going to explain the fitness fatigue model that Zatsiorsky came up with,
Hmm.
but essentially it's like it's sort of like this. Like if you want to get super compensation, you have to torture yourself. And if you study the military boot camp stuff that looks at like super compensation waves and overtraining and
Hmm.
testosterone and cortisol ratios, the more you destroy someone, ultimately the more they will rebound. It's just that you have to appreciate the timetables that these things take and the delayed transmutation physiology. Because the deeper you go, the ultimately greater that you'll rise. But you have to manage fatigue because you will alter movement patterns and potentially drive someone into terrible movement dysfunction and pain. So it's this incredible balancing act between the two,
Right.
where I look at it as avoid interset fatigue as though it's the worst thing in the world.
Right.
Accumulate intraset fatigue at a very high level, and not just today, but you have to think over the course of like a 3-week wave. And then ultimately, by the end of 3 weeks in a concentrated loading block that I'll put you through, you're not even going to be able to know your name. Like you're going to be confused. You're going to be all kinds of jacked up. I need you to get there because your fatigue will ultimately drive your super compensation. Um, and it's like if you are not weaker by the end of the training block, I haven't done my job. You need to be weaker. You need to experience drop-offs. Uh, Again, I refer back to D.B. Hammer, who, if you haven't read him, you got to read his stuff. It's very poorly translated, but they were always those guys were looking for very specific percentage drop-offs in strength qualities and various physical performances. And once you hit that drop-off percentage, you will in fact be ready to induce the mechanisms of adaptation.
Hmm.
Um, and it's
So
all about adaptations.
now this is a great segue into CrossFit because there's obviously that
Okay, let's
there's
do it.
super compensations and extreme amounts of fatigue
Mhm.
involved with that. They just want to know what your views are on CrossFit. And when I say they, it's Tom Yanuzzi, hopefully I said that right, and Gerard Friedman. They
Yeah,
just say, what does Pat think about CrossFit? I
I
have one.
know
Yeah.
I know some CrossFit coaches that are better than almost any strength and conditioning coaches that I know. I
Uh-huh.
know some CrossFit coaches that are worse than any garbage personal trainer that I know.
Uh-huh.
CrossFit is good, bad, and the ugly. It is that. Okay. Um,
Everything.
yeah, it really is. There are some tremendously smart guys that I know that are CrossFitters. There are tremendously stupid people that I know that are CrossFitters. Um, the problem with CrossFit is you have no idea what you're getting into in any box that you step into. There's nothing. Okay, and here's the deal. If you just talk simply like CrossFit headquarters and these things that they believe in, they always talk about these broad domains of fitness development, which is admirable, and I respect this because I think CrossFit is the most well-intentioned thing in the world, and I think that people really like it, and I think they do some things very, very well that we can really learn from, and I think they do some things that are the worst things that you could ever do, and we can learn from that.
Uh-huh.
Um, so it's like this: what is the good of CrossFit? I
Right.
think the best thing that CrossFit has done is that they've created a community, and I think that we are ultimately tribal and pack animals, and that we love community and we love family and we love these close associations with other humans, and that we have lost this in many ways within public and private sector training. And I've I tried to create a family with Team Iron Sports,
Yep.
uh, and because some of the things that I took very seriously were team lunches and team dinners, and joking around and having fun. I programmed that into what I was doing in many, many ways. Yeah, there it is. I mean, that was a family, okay? And like any family, we had dysfunction, and not everybody liked each other, and I'm okay with that. But I'm pretty sure that we respected each other. Uh, but CrossFit has created this beautiful community. It really has. And yeah, a lot of CrossFitters are big giant douchebags. You know, like they just are. Okay, like I just look at it like that. And look, whatever. But yeah, board shorts and chalk buckets and like their douchey language and their douchey names for things. Like yeah, it's just straight up like cheese ball stuff. But I learned from it, and I wanted to create my own community and my own sort of like culture. And
Uh-huh.
it's culture. We're all seeking culture and some kind of authentic human
Right.
experience. So
Exactly.
I think that's the best thing that CrossFit did, and I think that we have a lot to learn from that. Another thing that I think is really important to understand about CrossFit is that I think that you need to work really, really hard if you're ever going to get anywhere in strength and athleticism.
Right.
You need to train, and those people train their asses off. Maybe not in the smartest way, but they train hard. Okay, and I think that women have been shortchanged for years in terms of
Uh-huh.
how hard we've expected them to train. And the women of CrossFit train hard,
Yeah.
really hard. And
Exactly.
we've seen, and the other thing is this, like, look, I think that most people that are smart in the field of strength and conditioning understand the alactic aerobic model. And I think that we understand that that's kind of the secret recipe for like really freaky strength and speed and all that kind of jazz. Um, and CrossFit is so much in the middle. It's like everyone that's smart is like, avoid the middle, avoid the crap out of the middle. And CrossFit embraces the middle. And we have all these funny
Gotcha.
things that we say about them. Forging mediocre fitness or whatever the hell it is. There's all kinds of clever things. But they are driving the mediocre and the midline hard, and what you're going to get with that are some pretty good adaptations in some
Oh yeah.
regards, because hypertrophy is protein synthesis, and protein synthesis responds to a certain internal environment, and
Mm-hmm.
that internal environment is one where it's a combination of mechanical forces, temperature, and pH alterations. And quite frankly, a little bit of muscle mass goes a long way in sports, and I think
Little.
particularly for women, and most women are terrified of muscle mass. They think they're going to turn into Arnold Schwarzenegger on day one, and we do know the recipe for hypertrophy. You know, you got to bust your ass, and you got to become tremendously metabolically uncomfortable with a combo of force production lumped on top of it.
Right.
And that's exactly what CrossFit has given women. And for people of low training age, that works really well. And women have gotten tremendous results from CrossFit. I think
So
that if
so
you're,
as a model and a I guess like a vessel, CrossFit has been very good for strength training for women. Is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
CrossFit turns women into men and men into women.
There you go.
So it's like this. Uh, if you think CrossFit is going to give you everything that you need for an athlete that doesn't, and look, I think everybody, inside secrets, everybody that's really nasty in the CrossFit games is nasty because of everything else that they ever did except for CrossFit. All
Right.
right. Like they were a high level athlete in something else, and they were bored because they ran out of real estate and how far they could progress in their sport.
Right. Right.
And they're like, well, I like to train, and I like hot chicks, and I like
Right. Right.
I like endorsements, and I like money, and I like fame. So let's do CrossFit.
It's all, yeah. It's all there.
So
There you
it
go.
like what? So that, like, the good is the community, and the good also is that CrossFit has figured out a way to make misery in training fun, and they've done
Yeah.
it catchy names and that kind of stuff. And I've stolen that immediately. Okay, so like I look during certain blocks. I very rarely use these blocks, but I drive volume blocks into athletes from time to time, and you have to do really shitty things during volume blocks.
Oh yeah.
So I used catchy little names on protocols so that you'd be like, and I just made the names 10,000 times more badass than CrossFit names. Like,
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like,
not friender.
I can't even remember what the hell the protocols were. I could dig them up from my computer files.
Right, right.
We had Desert Eagle. I love that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and I just look at dudes and be like,
Today's Desert Eagle.
replica. If I saw they weren't working hard, and they wouldn't know what that meant, but I'd get them to watch the movie Snatch. And I think if you watch that movie, it makes you more of a badass, and you get to appreciate Bullet Tooth Tony and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then we had the Hammer of the Gods. Okay, that was a good one, man.
Is that
And
Thor?
then I had these horrendous cluster sets, and I didn't call them clusters. I just called it Shitstorm 1, Shitstorm 2, and then we just had other ones. I named one protocol Hya. That's all it was called.
Giddy up.
Yeah, we used to literally just scream "Yeah!" as we were doing this damn thing, and there's something that made that doable. And then we had like the one that I busted out more than any of the other ones was staring down the barrel of a 45. Okay, and that just sounds badass, right? Like
Yeah.
you want to do that, don't you? Like as a man, you just want to stare down the barrel of a 45. And that thing was horrible. It
What was
was
it?
it was 45 total reps, and would pick a big bang exercise.
Squat
And
deadlift.
yeah, exactly. And it was wave loading stuff. Set 1 was 70%. Set 2 was, I think, 70. I'd have to dig it up again. I think it waved up to 77.5%, and the middle set was in between. But you had to accumulate 45 total reps. You would get 45 seconds between sets, and it was 9 sets of 5 reps. And it was one of these things that when I wrote it down on paper, I was like, I don't know if this is possible. I looked at the percentage guideline charts, and it seemed to be possible. And then I was like, well, we're going to give it a shot. And it was the closest thing to impossible that was just possible that I've ever done. And
That sounds awful.
yeah, it was bad. And but I'll tell you what, man, that block made a lot of people stronger because we did staring down the barrel of a 45 for 3 straight weeks, and we trained 5 days a week.
Holy
5
shit.
days a week, sometimes 6, sometimes 7 days a week. It's possible. And things that are
wild.
almost, just possible things will make you really strong. And for lack of a better word, it will make you mentally tougher. And in my mind, mentally tougher is heart rate variability, because heart rate variability is your ventral medial prefrontal cortex. And the ventral medial prefrontal cortex is where you store your own autobiography. That is the story that you tell yourself. You don't know what you're capable of as a human until you've done it.
Yeah,
And once you've done something, you know that you're capable of a lot of things.
exactly.
And if you feel as though you are in control and that you can do something,
That's it.
it increases your heart rate variability.
That's it. That's it.
So,
Beautiful.
you know, that's the good that I've taken from CrossFit. What's the bad? We know these things. Like, the bad is that they don't have effective program design.
Right.
It's jumbled. It's mixed. There's no focus. You never go anywhere. You're going nowhere. You're chasing your tail. And then what's the ugly? Every goddamn YouTube video and Facebook post where we, like people that have no right doing exercises. That we're watching first graders trying to do calculus with the way that the exercise choices.
Right.
The sets and reps selections with loads and the execution of those exercises, it's scary, and we all know what kind of damage people are doing. And look, like, guys are like, some dude broke his neck snatching or something recently in CrossFit, and like you see pregnant women doing crazy things, and you just see things that are really scary. So CrossFit. Look, I use a lot of the same exercises CrossFit uses. I like their implements. Thank God they're getting away from, machines and the big box commercial gym stuff, and they're doing all this cool stuff, and people are excited.
Right.
But people need to earn the right to do certain things, and it's
Right.
that's my take on it. So CrossFit has CrossFit's almost there, and the thing I really like about CrossFit is they're not afraid to experiment, and they're not afraid to get better. they aren't.
Right.
And I think CrossFit's gotten more people to do good exercises than any other strength and conditioning kind of model or thought process that's ever existed. And look, I'm gonna hate on them. I'm gonna hate on everything, and I'm also gonna love stuff too. I see it both ways, and it's a big logical fallacy to throw out a smart thing that an idiot has to say. Sometimes a broken clock is right twice a day, and if you're not, so it's sometimes the dumbest people in the world will say some of the smartest things you've ever heard,
Right.
and if you blow off everything, then you miss out on some gold.
Exactly. Very interesting. Last couple things. Liesl Croft had a question. I think we talked about a lot of things already.
Yeah.
But this is kind of to, I guess, wrap it up. A really good question. Best resources for someone who is interested in strength, power, and hypertrophy to learn programming and training variations. I think she's a strength coach from over the pond. So.
Okay. This is such a tough question. I think that in corresponding with Bill Hartman through Facebook and email and stuff like that, like he sent me a link to his recommended reading list, and
Okay.
I would say
I'll put that up too.
Yeah, wherever the hell that link sends you to, read that. Read as much of it as you can, as fast as you can. My philosophy is that I examine the practices of the best. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
So, and then I just copy them. So if you're interested in utilizing weightlifting in the weight room with your athletes, read Andrew Carnegie or whatever his name is. I think I probably mispronounced that thing as bad as I can. But he's published I think it was Dynamic Alikio, the website, and the Sportivny Press is what he put together. I think he's done a better job at translating the Russian weightlifting literature better than anybody else has.
Yep.
I mean, does anybody know what they do in China? I have no idea. But
we need to contact the Chinese strength and conditioning coaches.
Yeah, because obviously they're doing something right. Although I will say that there was a study found that certain Chinese men can take testosterone and they don't test positive on steroid tests. It's because of some conversion with testosterone and epitestosterone levels, like WADA.
Wow.
Testosterone and epitestosterone scale. And I think that when you take steroids, your epitestosterone doesn't increase as your testosterone increases dramatically, and the only thing they're testing is the ratio. And somehow certain men of Chinese ethnic descent beat that.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, they can take steroids and testosterone and not test positive for testosterone.
That's wild. I never heard of that.
So, and the person that I heard that from was Jay Hoffman, presenting at the NSCA National Convention in 2010, and he's the president of the NSCA, and whatever you think about the NSCA, they are literature and research-based as an organization, and that is something that is a research and literature-based finding.
Interesting. Good.
So, yeah, steroids make you stronger. Shocking.
Never
Okay.
knew that.
But I would say, okay, so you want to utilize weightlifting? Well, read what the Russians had to say. I mean, they kind of invented the deal in terms of modernizing the sport. And read what Ivan Abagiev had to say. Sam Leahy, read that. Okay, I've been going back and forth with him about that stuff. But yeah, I mean, Ivan Abagiev. I don't know if you can ever say that anyone will ever be a greater strength and conditioning coach than him. He's won more gold medals in the sport of weightlifting, which is the highest talent pool strength sport in the world. And he did it with a country much smaller than China or Russia, and he dominated their asses for a long time until they essentially just copied everything that he did. So read them, and then if you want to use bench pressing and you want to use that stuff, well, kind of maybe start with powerlifting, but for athletes, I'm a little sketched out by the big arches at this point, just from what I've learned about zones of apposition and extension and tone and all that kind of jazz. But
yeah, I get really torqued up.
It's kind of like alternation, man. Get into a pattern, get out of a pattern. If you can get the biggest powerlifting arch in the world and then you can still show me flexion and parasympathetic tone, well, maybe you're rocking the world real hard and you're going to get some big bang.
Yeah, sure.
You know, read Louis Simmons if you want powerlifting. Read Chad Wesley Smith and the Juggernaut folks talking about that stuff. Read, okay, so you want program design? In my mind, the ultimate test of program design is still strength sports because it's a numbers game. All right, and program design is number manipulation. You want to know what the best programs are out there right now? Well, you got the West Side Barbell Model, which is more of a generalist perspective. You know, in many ways, like in the other federations that are a little bit more testing based, because you can do a lot of shit and get away with it if you're on steroids.
Right. Yeah, well, naturally.
You know, like Shako, Smolov Jr. I mean, like, yeah, from a strength and conditioning perspective, we would look at those things and say, you're out of your mind.
Right.
Are you kidding me? But I'll tell you what, the best powerlifters in the world, as far as I can tell, in the international scene, one of my favorite things I heard, and I don't even remember where I heard it recently, what's the best assistance exercise for deadlifts? More deadlifts. Yeah. And how many deadlifts? Lots and lots. Okay, so it's kind of like take that and learn that and then think about it. Think about it long and hard and think about how it would fit in with the people that you work with. Because, no, I'm not recommending that you Smolov junior cycles with your team sport athletes. I'm just saying you should read it, okay? And then it's kind of like, well, nutrition. This is something that I heard Santana talk about in 2004, and it still resonates as being true. Who knows more about nutrition than anybody else? Bodybuilders.
Right. I agree. Okay.
You know,
Ethan comes to mind.
Ethan Grossman, that's exactly what I was thinking about. And it's like, you know, so, you know, Bill Hartman said something very powerful that affected me emotionally this weekend. He was talking about mentors, and he was talking about a good mentor is someone whose protege quickly surpasses them. And Ethan Grossman, in many aspects, has surpassed me already, and he's 23 years old. And he's a monster, and anyone that knows him knows exactly what I'm talking about. He knows PRI much better than I know PRI.
DNS, he's on DNS, right?
Absolutely, and I think that he probably knows nutrition better than I do. And I keep my ears open. Whenever Ethan has something to say, I listen, and I will pursue everything that he tells me to learn about. And the guy that he told me to listen to is a guy named Ray Pete, and I have no idea who Ray Pete is. But I'm going to listen to all of Ray Pete's stuff at some point when I finish my PRI pursuit, basically.
Never.
It's like, yeah, well, I know. Well, here's the weird thing about PRI and nutrition. I am eating like shit these days, and I keep getting leaner and stronger, and I keep training less frequently and poorly. And it's kind of like, why am I getting leaner and stronger? Well, I have a thought that it's probably due to the fact that my brain, the brain controls everything. It controls protein synthesis and fat mobilization and substrate utilization, the whole deal. And I think I have a better brain as a result of the PRI stuff, and I think that that leads to better emotional states, and emotional states are linked with hormones and autonomics, and it all fits together. But at the same time, if you eat, you know, foods that are going to activate your immune system, you're going to be more sympathetic, and your cortisol and all that kind of crap hormone stuff. So you gotta put it all together. And if we, you know, God, the calories in, calories out thing. Can we just please kill that thing? You know, please. You know, what's way more important is the way that food affects your systems. You know, like that's way more important. But I would say that from respectable people that I've heard in the field of nutrition, the guy that I learned more from is Rob Wolf in the Paleo Solution podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
And then if Ethan says that Ray Pete is ahead of everyone else, I believe that Ray Pete is ahead of everyone else, even though I've never listened to Ray Pete. And another guy that I trust a lot, Matt Tripp, out in the San Francisco area, confirmed that for me. Yeah, dude, you got to listen to Ray Pete. So I will, I promise. I'm probably going to lay outside and catch some sun and put my headphones in and listen to that at some point this summer even, when I get bored rereading my manuals over and over again. So learn from the best, okay?
Right.
I implemented this with movement dysfunction-based sciences. Gray Cook identified as the best, and I learned
Right.
everything I possibly could, and that led me to Yanda, okay? And then I learned everything I possibly could about Yanda, and then I listened to people that I thought were smarter than me, like Kevin Neild and Connor Ryan, and they said, dude, you should check out PRI. So I checked out PRI, and now I ended up there because I just followed what I thought were the practices of the best. And food, same thing. Yeah, there's Charlie Francis right down at the bottom of that slide. So when it came to speed development, what did I do? Well, everybody said you got to read Charlie Francis that I trusted. So I read Charlie Francis. I read every single thing of Charlie Francis. And Charlie Francis confirmed this alactic aerobic model. And then that led me to Joel Jameson, who confirmed it again. And that bounced me back to Yanda. And Yanda is talking about, what is the reason why tissues go into trigger points, and we get all these cross syndromes and movement dysfunction. Well, it's low oxidation of tissues, and why? Well, it's energy system stuff. And then you're talking about energy system stuff, and that's directly linked to autonomics. It all links back. All of the great ones are doing the same stuff in many ways. They're talking about the immune system. They're talking about the endocrine system. Those are both under the domain of autonomics. And then we're talking about, shocking oxidative development for strength and power people. And it reminds me of my interview with Dr. Pallone, where I told him I didn't want to learn anything about the cardiovascular system because it wasn't phosphagen. And I feel stupid now because it was the model, and from a basic science and physiology perspective.
Right.
And it's just like, it just seems as though everything ties together. If you examine the practices of the best, there are threads that tie them all together. And I believe in patterns. I believe the universe works in patterns. And I believe that if you can identify patterns and see things in a patterned perspective, that it makes your job easier. It makes it so much easier because you don't have to memorize every little muscle, and you don't have to memorize every little data point, and you don't have to.
Right.
It's just like this pattern of primitive humans eating real food, various kinds. Inuit eating only fat and meat, and then you've got the Catawbans eating like 70% carbohydrates from fruit and sweet potatoes, and they're shredded too. And then you've got just every culture that you can examine that's primitive and eats real food are shredded and athletic, and they get tall. And then all the people that are coaching individuals to the highest level of sports, at least in the sports that we consider to be mainstream, are all using the same aerobic alactic model, and they're managing fatigue, and they're talking about sneaky volume, and then I just think that's all you got to do. Identify who you think is the best in the world at what they do,
and go from there.
And copy them. And then once you copy them, I fake it till I make it all the time. If I'm coaching someone, hey, I know that I'm a chump in PRI, but I will coach people through PRI as though I am Ron Hruska. When I'm trying to coach people in bench pressing, I'm going to coach them as though I'm Louis Simmons. And then if I do it for long enough, I'll make it. And then I'll be able to do it my own way.
That's great. For sure. All right, let's. I want to wrap this up with one last question. I'm sure you can go off for another, really like your whole life, and go off onto this. Here's the slide here. What is your definition of greatness?
I believe.
Yeah.
I believe that it is. We're gonna go right back to The Alchemist. All right. I believe that it's identifying the path that you really enjoy walking, and I think that you need to walk that path with authority. And I think that you need to ultimately identify the fact that the process is the most important thing, and that if you're true to yourself and your path and your process, that you will be given gifts and feelings of accomplishment and pleasure that you didn't even realize were possible. And the moment that you give up and surrender and just kind of go along that pathway is the moment of victory. It's like I think that nobody ever gave enough credit to the smoke and mirrors in the Wizard of Oz. Okay, it was like people were disappointed that he wasn't a wizard and that he was a man and that he was hiding behind smoke and mirrors and curtains. And the more I read about plasticity and neuroplasticity, the more I appreciate smoke and mirrors. And in many cases, everything that you believe is correct, but it's not correct. And everything has its like sister molecule, and it's paired equal and opposite, because the universe works in very mysterious ways. And like I was talking about with black holes being the anchor of a galaxy, there's probably a black hole in the very center of everything, the most proximal of proximals that governs the universe. And we probably don't understand it, and it's just this concept of acknowledging the fact that there's no way that a human brain is really capable of understanding the ultimate truths that govern the universe, and that we can only begin conjecture, and it's a process of fun. It really is. Like if you are walking a path that you believe to be true, you may interpret road signs that we all see in slightly different ways. And you have to come to understand that your perspective is your own and it's unique, and you have to accept yourself, and you have to acknowledge that everything that you believe, it may be correct or it may be the exact opposite, that the mirror may be just as correct, and the smoke may be something that you can't see through clearly, and it's okay. And ultimately, it's cliche at this point to quote Bruce Lee and things of that nature, but it's still effective. There's really nothing wrong with cliches, and it's what is the useful part of a bowl? And the useful part of the bowl is that which is empty, and you should be seeking to fill your bowl, but you should have almost like a pinhole at the bottom of it so that it leaks, and it's a sieve. And that way you get to continuously refresh that bowl, and it's this constant pursuit of, like we live on a fluid world that spins and orbits and hurtles through space, and it's constantly changing, and the inner core is probably rotating in the exact opposite direction as the outer core, just as our bodies are, and the atmosphere is probably rotating in the exact opposite direction as compared to the spin of the Earth, and the like water rises and falls, and it's a cycle, and the only thing that we can say for sure about matter and energy is that it can't be created or destroyed, and that it just simply changes forms, and that in that process it can look very different and behave very differently, but it's still a very similar thing, and it's a level of depth. The universe and the world are a level of depth that we can't ever begin to really fundamentally understand, really. And it's fine. It's fine. You'll never get where you want to get, and that's a good thing. You just keep going and keep accepting the fact that it's the journey and the steps. And once you authentically take steps, you are reaching your greatness. And at the end of my life, I don't think that the things that will be important are how I placed at the 2013 World Championships.
Right.
The things that will be important to me will be the things that I get to hear back from the people that I've worked with, the mentors that I've had that I've made proud, and the people that I've brought into my life as my non-blood-based family, and the people that are my blood-based family that I'm doing my best to try to reconnect with and be real with.
Right.
And I think I could probably talk about this stuff relentlessly, and I think that
Yeah,
you
definitely.
understand what I'm saying, and I think that everyone that's listening probably understands what I'm saying. But uh, truth is what I'm after these days,
Right.
and and that's not easy, especially for someone like me who has had to be very careful of perception. And in many ways, I've been a liar in various parts of my life. And I'm tired of that. And I want to be true to myself and I want to be true to everyone else, no matter what kinds of consequences that results in. It's
Right.
very similar to the FMS screen. Uh, you can identify very quickly things that may or may not be good ideas, but be true about it. And I think that's a great way for me to end this discussion.
All right, there you go. Well, we covered literally everything that I think we could have covered for a good solid from 8 to 11 a.m. at least, 12 noon, whatever it is now. What we're going to do is we're going to have post this up on YouTube. It's going to go straight there. And then I'll just link a few of the things that we talked about. Like I wrote down a lot of notes. And I'll have timestamps for things too, so you can go off of that instead of looking at individual parts. So from there we can look at different like things you mentioned, like books wise or anything like that. So that's what
Miguel,
we'll
I
do.
really want to thank you for this.
Yeah, man.
I feel like I can only speak for myself, but I feel as though we have a really good sort of understanding of each other.
Oh yeah.
And I really do consider you to be a very good friend, and I really appreciate you putting this together and
Yeah,
giving me
man.
a chance to have some kind of a platform to be able to speak from, because I do like to speak and I do like to share what I know, and I really do respect you and what you stand for, and your beliefs and your pursuit of everything that I think we share as common goals. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. Yeah. All right, man. Hey, Pat. Have a good rest of the day.
You
We'll talk
too.
soon.